Recording.
Hello.
Hi, Andrew. I made it.
So good to see you.
Great to see you. It's great to meet you in whatever this is, electronics. How are you today?
It's all electric.
So
We'll get into that, though.
We're all simulations.
Yeah. Negentropic simulations.
That's right.
Kundalini robots.
Yeah. So where do you live?
I live in Iowa right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. I've driven through there. I've never stayed there.
Where do you live again? I forget.
North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
But I've lived in Indiana. I lived in California, Connecticut, New York.
Like I say, I thought you were in California. Okay. Yeah.
So what's up?
When I was about 16 or 17, one of the lyrics in one of the songs I wrote was, "Up is just a perspective on Earth's rounded floor."
Yeah. Oh, what a concept. So have you ever gone on Batgap and talked with Rick?
No, I've talked with him in private message, but I've never done an interview yet. But yeah, that'd be a good idea. I need to he asked me to write up my my 3 big experiences. I was gonna write up an email to him, and I kind of wanted to have a website up before then. Especially since I am a web designer and I don't have a website up for my non-duality talks yet, because I'm making them for other non-duality speakers and stuff because they're paying me, But it's like when you work for yourself, it's hard to get motivated, But I gotta make my own
website. Get some good ideas for your own website when you do it.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Keep it short and simple. I recommend.
Yeah. Nobody wants to read 9 paragraphs of
or get lost. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's draining for them to sit there and okay, now I gotta. So I'll put little quips throughout it. I think it'd be a good idea. Yeah, but once I have that done, I'll probably get in contact with Rick, and but yeah, I've talked to him in private messages. Never had an interview with him yet, but.
Do you feel you connect with him when you private message him?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really good guy.
Yeah. I always liked him. I always appreciated his interviews, and I always thought it'd be interesting to talk to him that way. It'd be a good idea.
Yeah, you're right up there in Rick territory in Iowa.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I learned that late too. I'm like, oh, he's from Iowa. Okay, sure, cool. He's in Fairfield, the TM hotspot. Yeah.
TM capital of the universe, right?
Yeah.
He was from Connecticut originally, and I spent quite a few years in Connecticut.
Ah. So all these traditions kind of talk about this in different ways, and I'm kind of a multifaceted expression of this. But I was kind of interested in, because I know you're coming at this from, obviously you are too. You've got a multifaceted thing going on there too. But I know you kind of have a Kashmir Shaivism type perspective that you like to speak from sometimes as well. So I wondered at some point if we could dig into that a little bit.
I think I feel, and again, my interpretation of Kashmir Shaivism is from being a yogi, not a scholar. So I know scholars sometimes, they go to pieces. And so a lot of the Kashmir Shaivism was from my first guru, Swami Muktananda. And what I feel is Kashmir Shaivism is life positive, which most teachings aren't, East or West.
Right.
And it's all inclusive. They use the word non-dual, but with Kashmir Shaivism, the word all inclusive, I think, is a much more accurate word, because non-duality, the non-dualists, they say everything's one, but that's Maya, or everything's one, but that's illusion or delusion.
No. Netty. Well, okay, but yeah.
So in Shaivism, the freedom, Svatantria, is expressed also as Maya, as ego, as delusion. So there's nothing.
Goddess dancing.
You can't do it wrong. You can't.
Right.
It's all. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of allowing everybody to be who they are, where they are, and you are that supreme consciousness just the way you are. If you want to do something about it, great. If you don't, go watch football.
Then you can enjoy that.
Yeah,
that's the way I like to put it. I say, you can. There is no purpose to any of this, but it's enjoying itself, and it's enjoying the unawakened state, and it's enjoying the awakened state. Like, it's not like you have to be in one state or another. One's better or worse. Like, they're both bittersweet expressions of what is, and they're both a romantic gesture unto itself as well. And in Dzogchen we call it the great perfection. It gives the seeker the wrong idea, like, oh, this thing I have to achieve. No. That's a description of what you always already are, regardless of what state you think you're in. Or
Exactly. And so the only advantage of awakening is realizing there's no difference between being awake and not awake. Or the not awake think there is.
So, but it takes a sage to realize that, and to feel it that way, or else it doesn't feel that way.
Disappointment,
As Chogyam Trungpa said, he said, enlightenment is ego's greatest disappointment.
Exactly.
It isn't something the seeker ever gets, because the seeker falls away seconds before it strikes.
Right.
And so at no point did Andrew become enlightened, the poor bastard. He never got to taste it.
Right. Put out of a job before it happened.
Yeah.
I think the end result of everything I've done, the final conclusion, is just be kind to everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Because nothing else ultimately seems important.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
Good to have some money and stuff, but I mean, ultimately, just be kind.
Yeah, and in that kindness, that true love can take many forms. It might not even look like kindness or true love if it's to the mind. Yeah, right.
It can be easily misperceived.
Yeah, it's easy to get the wrong idea, is the way I put it. It's easy to get the wrong idea. It takes awakening to even have right view, as the Buddhists put it. That's another funny thing. Buddhists say things like, well, you got to get rid of your attachments. You got to do that. It's like, well, no, this is just a description of what it's like after, effortlessly. So it's not like you need to put 12 hours of utter discipline and focus, and to the detriment of the rest of your experience.
I'm not a TM person, and I'm not familiar, but somewhere in my early days, I think Maharishi Mahesh Yogi said they've got the eightfold path of yoga backwards. You start with samadhi. You start with that realization, and then you're into meditation, and then there's a natural withdrawal.
That's true.
And the natural knowing how to be in the body, breathe, and then the moral and ethical practice. They're not practices. They're the way you end up living. It's an expression. It's not like I'm trying to be a moral and ethical person.
This is what happens.
Expressions.
Yeah. There's no choice but unconditional love to be pouring forth.
No choice. It's not a discipline. It's not just. So I don't know where I read that, but I think it was Mahesh Yogi who said that.
I had a friend of mine recently say that he never seen TM or anything about it, but that he smoked DMT once and saw Mahesh Yogi on one of those layers, and I thought, that okay.
Really?
Maybe that all connects somehow. Okay, sure. Oh, that was funny. He said, I don't know anything about that stuff, but I did see that guy once on a DMT trip, and then years later, I saw him again, and that's a real guy. Like, who is this guy? Oh, he's a TM guy. Oh, okay, sure, why not? But he had seen him in that. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, that's the interesting thing about those type of visions is sometimes they connect up with things on this plane, and it's really kind of startling when that happens. 5-EMO DMT. Somebody, I won't mention his name, but he's, in my opinion, a very well respected non-duality teacher who I've known for a long time. He's written a number of books, but he private messaged me one day and he said, if you ever have a chance to do 5-MeO DMT, do it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I've never done that, but
I've never
good
done
things.
it either, but I respect
Heard it's like
this
direct
guy.
access to Dharmakaya on a certain level. Yeah.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. So if I see
Sure.
a toad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm open-minded. Yeah. I've actually had similar experiences just kind of tantrically or through Kundalini.
Yes.
Via Samadhi, astral Samadhi, launched into via the Kundalini awakening I had at 24. Kind of had a similar, it was an endogenously generated or correlated to the DMT produced by your body, but it's not just that. Obviously, there was the energetic component preceded that, but all of that together kind of launched me into a similar state where I'm seeing different types of white light and things. But I know when someone smokes 5-MeO DMT, they just see from what I've heard, I could be wrong, they kind of get kind of like direct access to the void, which sometimes is seen as just white light, solid white light.
Yeah.
Or the way I would put it from kind of Sokchen Dharmakaya type perspective, I would say we are shadow creatures in an ocean of clear light.
Right. There are all sorts of speculation about what Kundalini is doing in the brain, but I think especially in the early days with the Shaktipat gurus, what attracted people is the psychedelic type experiences, but to go and stabilize required some commitment and discipline, but without a doubt.
Yeah.
White light.
I tend to tell people that. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just do that back and forth for 2 hours. No, what was I going to say? So I'm the type of guy that usually makes bold statements and says things like, awakening is not gradual, and I'm skeptical of anyone that claims it is, and because it's a sudden radical shift, as far as I'm concerned.
Darkenment is gradual.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like walking down a path towards a cliff. That's gradual.
Yeah.
You fall off that cliff. It's
exactly.
It's real sudden. And when you're on that path, you think you know where you're going.
Yeah.
And you only find out. And so
you find out that where you're going is down.
Yeah. Nothing to grasp.
Yeah. And once you're falling, you're just you tips of your fingers can't quite touch anything around you. There's no hope. Yeah. But I say things like it's not gradual. However, I did spend years and years cultivating the energy system and the channels to try to have a Kundalini awakening, and then it did happen. And then 3 years after that, I had a kind of body of light, subtle body type experience. And then 5 months after that, liberation occurred. So energetically, at least, when liberation occurred, the channels were primed so that too flavored even that. So the shift was also flavored by a mystical, energetic component as well. So they're kind of both were there. And the apple doesn't fall gradually; it ripens gradually and falls in an instant. Yeah.
Yeah, I think preparing the human vehicle to hold that it seems like it's taking time, but I think when you have that realization, you realize I've always had this realization. It's always been here. My attention has been somewhere else, but this clear light. I mean, what else is there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's especially, I think Kundalini is at the root of all seeking, whether you're east or west. And I have people like Robert Stuckey who agree with me that the Holy Spirit, same thing as Kundalini and all that. But I think it's what gets a person initially out of the trance. You know, you're going to become a lawyer, you're going to be CEO.
And it can give you glimpses, you know, that's the thing. It's like I can give Shaktipat, but all it's going to do is give people glimpses, you know, and how that might be more frustrating than not getting a glimpse. So you're like, well, I want Shaktipat. Like, well, you think you want Shaktipat. Can I do it? Probably. Is it going to help you long term? I don't know. Might backfire. We can play with it if you want.
Filling up the holes in your bucket. There's no reason pouring water in a bucket full of holes.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's just gonna be gone a half hour from now or 2 days from now. It might change, you know, there might, and the way I do things is sometimes more spontaneous and longer lasting, like just through our words here now. People might watch this video and get a kind of subtle Shaktipat from both of us, just from behind our words and the vibration we're holding.
My Shaktipat's better than your Shaktipat.
Well, then you should charge more. No. He's got that top shelf Kundalini, guys.
I got to tell you a story about that. There was a guy, so Sri Dhyan Yogi came to stay with me. This is in the late 70s. And he was a real Shaktipat guru. He at that point, he hardly spoke English. And he had his lawyer. His lawyer was with him as a disciple. His lawyer used to be an LAPD cop. And then he went to school, became a lawyer, and then he became a disciple of Guruji. So Michael came out with Guruji. And Guruji didn't know how much to charge for Shaktipat. His basic inclination was to give it for free. But we kept saying, look, you have a teaching, and this is America. This isn't India. So these kids came, and they said they couldn't afford Shaktipat. So Guruji's going, I'm going to give them for free. And I said, Michael and I sat down with him. We said, you know, they just spent $200 on dope. The reason they can't afford Shaktipat is they bought a bunch of drugs. And you know, if they really want Shaktipat, I bet they can find the money somewhere.
Yeah.
And so Guruji is like, are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, we're pretty sure.
We're fairly certain.
This is in Connecticut, where you had to be a millionaire just to be poor.
So
poor Guruji's like, his heart's going out to these people, and they're just, you know, Guruji, I don't have any money. I spent it all on drugs. Too bad.
Yeah.
But it was good Michael traveled with him because Michael could translate American culture and get him to understand, you know, really
the real landscape was happening. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Americans can pretty much afford whatever they want.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. People spend so much money on silly stuff, and then they can't afford the most important things in their life. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
If you want something bad enough, you'll prioritize it and budget accordingly. Yeah, you're right.
Might have to buy less dope. Who knows?
I don't know why, but we were talking about psychedelics, we were talking about drugs, and we were talking about the body being a divine instrument and things like that. And it reminded me, in my early 20s, I took a very tiny, like a quarter of a tab of acid once. And I suddenly had, at the time, it felt like I had access to my higher self directly. I'm like, oh, I bet I could ask it a question. So I said, you know, is yoga a valid path? And it said, calibrate your instrument. And that always stuck with me. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. Like, ooh, oh, wow. Okay, yeah. You know, is yoga a valid path? Calibrate your instrument. I thought, sure.
I used to work for a precision instrument company, and that's what I did all day, is calibrate instruments.
On every level.
Yeah.
It's what we're doing right now. It's what you've been doing. That's funny.
But really, it's true. You know, that's a really good thing to say, because the human body, the way I perceive it, is an instrument. And if it's not picking up the realm of possibilities, it's because it's not tuned. And you said you prepared for Kundalini. How did you prepare to do it? I mean,
I did a lot of energy work.
Yoga is Kundalini yoga.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, even if you did even if you were to get into Lahiri Mahasaya's Kriya Yoga, he might say something like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah.
okay, but do 2 or 3 years of Hatha first so that you can sit up straight with your back not hurting, so
Yeah.
that you can then actually dig in. So yeah, I did Hatha yoga, I did power yoga, Ashtanga yoga, I did,
Good.
you know, on and off. Well, not like, I wasn't like buff or anything, full blast or anything. You know, I tried. And you know, it definitely has a all reaching effect. And I did a lot of energy work, like chakra based. I've always been very sensitive to life force energy and can feel it, so I just moved the energy and did it that way. I also did a lot of Kachari Mudra, tongue lock,
Come back.
and yeah, tongue back. And then you know, there's technically 4 stages, but I'm only interested in the first 3. So stage 3 is really so in other words, stage 1 is to get the tongue to the uvula, and then stage 2, which is what I've gotten to, is to get it above the roof of the mouth. And then you trace that up and up to the point where the tip of the tongue can push against the sphenoid sinus, and that would be stage 3, which is the ultimate goal in my opinion. You can go further than that, but there's no point in my opinion. But yeah, I did a lot of that for years and years and years and years. And I would say, so first of all, at age 8, I kind of go through this spiel a lot, so this might sound repetitive to some people, if someone's listening to this video, but at age 8, I was able to articulate out loud, I feel depressed because I feel as though I'm separate from the rest of the universe. And it's the loneliest feeling ever. I could articulate that at age 8. So that's when the seeking energy began. And I've always been a speaker in a sense. And at age 12, I was consciously, actively seeking this thing called enlightenment. At age 16,
How did you come across that word? How did you find out about enlightenment at age 12?
Buddhism.
So you were
comparative
reading
religion online.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I was researching every possible religion, trying to find what was real and how to feel better. And I always knew that, like, okay, we're all one, but I still feel wrong. Like, I still feel
Right.
separate.
Right.
Like, I always knew that. But at age 16, the Kundalini became like activated, if you will, not awake and not rising, just subtly more active. And I started experiencing cities and telepathy and electronic objects and things, you know, that whole thing, that whole side of things. And my eye color changed dramatically, almost overnight, from a dark brown for the first 16 years of my life to suddenly this vibrant hazel, where there's light brown, dark brown, bright orange, green, blue. And so that was interesting, because it was just a solid dark brown. And one day when I attribute that to a certain level to maybe neurotransmitters or Kundalini and how that all interrelates. But something came online, and it was subtle but detectable, and I was able to play with energy at that point, play with telepathy and cities and things like that, and projecting energy consciously at age 16. And charisma and creativity and things like that started manifesting more fully. And then for 8 years, I was trying to get it to rise fully in a non-subtle way. And then 8 years later, at age 24, it finally had the full-blown Kundalini awakening. And that kind of started yeah.
Were you doing Kriya Yoga?
Kind of. Really the only thing I was doing was Kachari Mudra as far as Kriya Yoga. Like, I was aware of Kriya Yoga and the lineage. I was aware of what they taught and things. I was interested in it. I thought it was potent and interesting and the right thing to do. But as far as like actually digging in, doing the practice, the only thing I really did fully was Kachari Mudra. And
so you were discovering all this pretty much on your own.
Yeah. And then but it's interesting how it works, because like during the Kundalini awakening itself, there was like spontaneous kriyas and mudras.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if
phonemes,
Kachari Mudras ever
pranayamas.
happened spontaneously.
No, not fully spontaneously here. But and during the Kundalini awakening, I wasn't actively in Kachari Mudra. However, that body of light I saw 5 months prior to liberation, I was age 27 at that point. I was walking through my apartment and feeling kind of blissed out and kind of aware, and something just kind of like this urge to like, hey, go sit in like formal seated meditation pose. I'm like, I don't ever do disciplined, formal, willpower seated. What is this? Where's this urge coming from? But this spontaneous urge, like, no, go do the 4 bandhas, not 3, all 4. You use Kachari Mudra too. So I'm like, okay. So I get in the position, I full lotus. I straighten up my spine. I suck in the perineum. I suck in my belly. I've got, zazen hands going on. I put my chin to my chest, and then I go into full Kachari Mudra consciously, where, above the roof of the mouth, stage 2 Kachari Mudra. And then I see this body of light. And I'm not prone to a schizophrenic tendency, so I'm prone to maybe at that time ADHD and bipolar tendencies, but not seeing things, right? So the fact that I see something is like happens 2 or 3 times in a lifetime here. It's not like, oh yeah, I see dragons in the room. Like, well, okay, and he saw a body of light. Okay. No, it's like I don't ever see anything, never seen Bigfoot, never seen him, so it's like to then see seemingly this geometric shape of light while I'm in Kachari Mudra. And that's the thing too. I would say after the Kundalini awakening, and then I looked up again, Kundalini awakening is like, oh yeah, all that was there, even stuff that I hadn't read about. Okay, cool. Okay, that makes sense. And then even that body of light, it's like I looked it up, and apparently, and I didn't really know this, but apparently Kachari Mudra, literally one of the purposes of it is to separate the subtle energetic body from the physical body if you want to travel around in that. And I never really thought of it that way until after it already happened. And I thought, does this have anything to do with that? And, oh yeah, it does. Oh, okay. Yeah, the skywalking seal. Of course it does. Sure. So
speaking of clear light, this Sunday in Satsang, I'm teaching a technique, co-meditation for the dying. And that method comes out of the Nyingma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, which what Westerners call the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but it's really the Tibetan book of hearing transitional stages, which is, well, even this life.
Hearing upon entering the bar, liberation upon hearing while entering the bardo.
Right. And so this is a way sitting with people when they're dying, and it's a co-meditation. So the person who's trained is actually helping the person, but people who do this, they can float away so peacefully, so gently. Of course, they have to have some time working together and stuff, but it's really what the dying person's actually experienced, like going into deep, profound samadhi. And it's easier if you're not in tremendous pain and stuff. But even then, meditation, co-meditation with somebody who's in pain, it eases the pain, it eases the suffering of the physical body because attention starts becoming free. And the other myth that's dispelled is people say you always die alone. But if you use this technique with people, you find out that your consciousness, I talk about this being the absolute and we all appear separate. We're all. You find out that your consciousness and the dying person's consciousness transition together. It's a very weird thing, but you're like walking with them. It's hard to say in words.
It's funny because the person alone. I talked to you before you does that.
Does what?
That. They sit with the dying and they have the crystal vajra.
Synchronicity today with a
clear
light.
And then before that, exactly. Today's a very charged day.
Yeah. Well, it's a good tech. Everybody's going to die, and it's useful to know how to be there for people dying and not help them be very calm and peaceful.
Definitely,
So you talk to a lot of people every day.
Well, not every day, but every Thursday.
Every Thursday.
And now it's like every Thursday. And so I have a day job too, but I'm trying to transition away from. I have multiple jobs. I'm trying to transition away from the most mundane of the day jobs into doing more of these talks, for example. But
what's your day job?
So I do telemarketing right now.
Oh, okay, telemarketing.
But I also do that's the only job I have where I actually work for somebody. My other 3 jobs is just me, and I do
website.
I do web design, I do like tech support type stuff manage YouTube channels, websites, things like that. And obviously I do
Now
my
I know who to
non-duality
qualify.
talks.
Tech problems.
Yeah, there you go.
So what do you sell telemarketing?
Sirius XM radio.
Oh,
It's a satellite radio.
okay, that's cool.
So it's not as boring as Tupperware or something. It's not too bad.
Well, Tupperware has its place.
Yeah, nothing wrong with if there's a Tupperware salesman watching this, don't get the wrong idea. You know, yeah.
When I worked for that instrument company, we ended up with a house on Lake Hayward Club. It was an elite area to live, but we were all long hair freaky hippies. And everybody, we actually had a, what were they called? Admiral, retired admiral living behind us, who was very kind to us. But it was like they were really wary of us because we were freaks.
Yeah.
But we obviously had jobs to be living there. And we knew we were finally accepted. And Sheila got invited to a Tupperware party.
That's funny.
You're now in the in group.
That's funny. Oh man. So there does seem to be some kind of energetic signature that what's your view on like reincarnation, for example? How do you personally see that?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I don't know. Second thing is I've had many experiences that could be interpreted. First, well, before that, back up. I've worked in mental health for a long time. And I've worked with hypnosis for a long time.
Right.
So I know all sorts of people believe things that aren't true.
Yeah.
I'm not, so I'm really
lots of reality
aware,
tunnels. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very aware that just because people have experiences and believe something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. But I've had in meditation many experiences that could be interpreted, past lives. I've had them in, I'll tell you about one in waking consciousness. I've done hundreds of past life regressions with people, and some of them were extremely impressive. I mean, one woman regressed before we even got through the process. And she apparently was a woman who was thrown out on the streets by her husband in London. And she had no way to support herself. She's terrified, and then she's murdered. And all this just came up before we even formally got there. And then to see her. So anyway, and I have close friends who can still talk me into doing them. And then there are all the people who have research, the very good research. So all I can say is I can't definitively say it, but it certainly seems a possibility. It certainly seems a very legitimate reality to me. So how's that sound?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, because it's kind of a paradox in my case, especially because it's like, here I am. Most people expect me to be, a radical non-dual speaker and to come attacking them if I ask a question like that. But it's like, it's funny because on the one hand, obviously, there's this the ordinary dualistic way of seeing things that most adult humans see the world this way, and then there's this obvious absolute layer that we have access to upon awakening, or if you have a deep understanding that we're all one, then you'd say, well, why does there even need to be, if we're all one and it's all your lives? And so of course you have access to all of them. But then in between those, the question is, and it's personal speculation on both our ends or anyone else's ends, but is there a layer in between that? And my own personal experiences would suggest that there seems to be, because I had this,
right.
I saw this energetic signature, I was launched into astral samadhi, things like that, so it makes you wonder, but then I have this radical shift in perspective where I realize, oh, but there's nobody real in here. And so how do you
there's
put those two together in a coherent way?
Yeah,
I don't know how. Maybe I already did.
There's a program. There's an Andrew program.
Yeah.
We don't know. Maybe okay, I just bought a new computer. And everything on my old, not everything, I lost some stuff, but most of the stuff, the photographs, my essays, I don't know, they talk about it, they're in the, what do you call it? The
Cloud.
cloud.
Yeah.
What the fuck does this, pardon my language, what the hell does that mean? I
Oh,
don't
I
know
don't
what that,
fucking care.
but when I got my new computer,
Yeah.
whatever the cloud is, put it back on my computer. So even
Yeah.
though my computer is different,
Right. Yeah.
it's reincarnated. All
And there
my
wasn't
stuff.
even a USB drive used. It was just through the cloud. Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
don't know how it happens. It's all magic to me,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Literally.
And I do think our technology like that is duplicating, like humans are creating technologies that are duplicating their actual reality tunnels.
Yeah.
Like Andrew is right here in my room,
Yeah.
and Andrew is also in Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm there and I'm here. So, and there's nothing connecting us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's my iPad, there's nothing there. And so we're reduplicating what's actually out there. I was in Chapel Hill one day with a friend, we were with friends of ours, and Jay was a colonel in the special forces during Vietnam. And through some weird thing, he ended up coming to our center with his wife, Joyce. And he and I, we were all good friends. And the women were inside this store, and he and I were standing outside. And there was a young woman getting her bicycle, and then some jerk started hassling her. And Jay and I turned towards him, and I think it may have been Jay who said, "Leave her alone." And he said it in such a way you had no doubt that you were going to leave her alone.
Yeah.
And I immediately felt like Jay and I were both samurais. That we've done this many times before. I was totally like a Japanese samurai. And I looked at Jay, he was standing there, and the guy who looked at us got it. He was gone in a second.
No doubt. Yeah.
And the girl thanked us and everything. The woman thanked us. But Jay and I, this is wide open, wide awake, but it was like there were two samurai there. And it was just, that was a very bizarre thing. But I suspect that's why a conscientious objector and a colonel in the special forces were able to become friends.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
So who knows? I can't say
definitively,
but I've certainly, got to keep a very open mind about a lot of these things, especially with the good scientific research coming up.
Yeah.
And I think Rick Archer does a good job in bringing these people on his show and getting them to
there's a very wide variety of different perspectives. I always liked that because that's how I try to express this too, is like, cause that's kind of where I come from. It's not one path as much as it is just trying to ravenously consume and intercompare everything I can get my hands on. And they do, there is a core to those. There is kind of a non-dual core to all of these teachings. And that level is always kind of radical because it goes against the grain of the seeking ego mind almost every step of the way. So that's why I would even argue that's why we're wearing black t-shirts right now, is because we're to the seeking mind, we're the bad guy. We're the cowboy, the black hat on, who comes marching around the corner. I'm your Huckleberry, like, and that's not what the mind wants to hear, but the sage is kind of like an executioner.
After you've attained the absolute, then what? And then you bring it into this relative and express it. And there's so many levels, so many reality tunnels, so many possibilities. And again, like we've already agreed, the main features, the loving kindness.
Yeah.
But I just think there's as Hamlet said, a lot more going on in heaven and earth than most people dream of. Yeah. And I think people ought to find what brings them joy and stuff.
And Hamlet. So I think Shakespeare was Sir Francis Bacon and his buddies, and Hamlet is a play about Freemasonry. That's for another conversation. But yeah.
Well, Freemasonry is based.
Yeah, rose by neither name. What's that?
Freemasonry is based on Kundalini. the 33.
Yeah, the Knights Templar. Oh, that's
Yeah.
true too. Yeah, I thought that too. I had that thought as well. The Scottish Rite, 33 steps, 33 buns in the spine, and also the Knights Templar were known to be keepers of the Kundalini. They called it the current. Yeah, exactly.
So the Crusades enabled a lot of Europe to get in touch with these what were then esoteric teachings. Whether it was Sufis or the Tantrics,
right,
Taoists.
Yeah.
And so some of them realized what they'd run into.
Yeah,
and of course, early Christianity and Judaism and stuff was not, we have such a misinterpretation of what was going on.
Exactly. It's closer to the Gnostic Gospels type thing. Yeah, that's what I tell people. I say, and sometimes people say, well, how can you speak with certainty about what the Buddha said or what Jesus said or what Socrates meant? It's like, for a reason, like, 'cause this is the state. This is very ordinary, though. This isn't walking on water and flying around like Neo in the Matrix. This is, Socrates going, so what is virtue?
Right.
Because there isn't such a thing, but Jesus never once mentioned sin or redemption. He didn't even believe in those things. He mentioned illusion and enlightenment and things like that, awakening from it.
He said, he said, don't your scriptures say ye all be gods?
Yeah.
And the I am that I am is before Abraham was, I am.
Yeah, exactly. Or in Zen, they say, show me the face you had before your parents were born. But this, the face of awakening is facelessness.
Yeah.
No face, no mask.
The word exists means to stand out.
Yeah.
The awakened state does not exist. What's realized doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's what everything stands out from, but itself is unborn.
Yeah, or as I say, God is non-existence itself.
Yes.
And Zen would agree with that. Kriya Yoga would agree with that. Soga-Chen would agree with that. Yeah.
Yep.
But the mind doesn't want to hear the word non-existence. It hears something bad in that. We see it as shimmering clarity or something, but the seeker sees that as like its biggest fear. And it views that as the fear of death, but it's really the fear of the self going away. Yeah. Yeah. It fears ending even though it never began. Yeah, it's funny.
The mind is doing, it's a verb, and it has to keep running around. And real silence, real realization, its job is to survive, and it realizes that if it realizes, it's going to disappear.
Yeah.
And
or
so
that it has to disappear prior to realization. Even depends on how you look at it, either upon realization or seconds beforehand, depending on how you look at it. Yeah.
But at a certain point in seeking, it realizes what's going to happen, and that's why religion and all of that, because you can pretend, you can have, I need another level. Yeah,
not enough.
Busy here.
Yeah. Now what? Now what do I do with my time? I'm still alive. Yeah.
So the mind is well defended. It's got all the tricks of the trade. It's
very clever, is the way I put it. The mind is very clever at tricking you. Yeah, exactly. Very good at what it does. Billions of years of prototyping to convince you that you're a person.
Right.
Or the way I say it is the mind tricks you not only into believing that the mind even exists, but to believing that you are the mind, so that then you end up defending the mind.
Right.
So then if the mind feels threatened, I feel threatened. You're the bad guy. He's wearing black. He even said he's the bad guy. He even told us he's the villain. He's a psychopath or a narcissist or something. Energy vampire. He's wearing black. No, but that's how the mind interprets it, right? Any sage, any potent, uncompromising sage with intensity is going to be viewed by the mind as, that's got to be a bad guy, right? Is this a bad guy? I can't tell. It's real clear, but is this a bad guy? Yeah, to the mind it is. This is the mind's worst enemy. and they're about to do battle, and that's why it runs away, because it knows who's going to win, type of deal. It doesn't. It actually wants to keep suffering so that the world seems real.
Well, you're right. Suffering makes it feel real.
But I like
Follow.
and one way I like to interpret Kundalini is, in physics we have this word entropy as this kind of chaos unfolding the universe, unraveling itself. But they also have this theorized force called negentropy, which is the ordering principle of the universe. I kind of like to call Kundalini negentropy. That's kind of the underlying intelligence that's orchestrating so-called order, or that's dancing as a hologram of form.
Well, one way I talk about Kundalini is it has an ascending and descending current. And the descending current is what puts intelligence or consciousness in a trance, especially the lower chakras about survival. I have to reproduce, I have to have control, dominant. Most people, you're either submissive or dominant, and that's like the third chakra. And so it hypnotizes us into limitation. And then our identity is with these lower struggles of survival and domination and reproduction and all that. But then when it starts the ascending current, it starts awakening. And that's, like you started at an early age, it's what starts people seeking, is you suspect there's much more possibility in life than we can condition. And then that's when it starts ascending and liberating consciousness from identification with these lower realms and moving it into a higher realm. It doesn't negate the lower, it's just not identified with it.
Right.
And so it becomes free.
Exactly.
So I think, from my view, Kundalini is what puts us in trance, and then it also liberates us from trance.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're saying rings true about the chakras and the levels of that, because I remember at a very young age, I remember looking around and being like, okay, like, why is everybody so complacently satisfied with like ape survival mode? Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not satisfied by, winning or losing the athletic competition, or who's the smartest in the room, or who's the most righteous, or who has the most resources or talents. It's like, it just doesn't feel satisfactory.
That's very true. I had learning disabilities, so I grew up always feeling that if there was somebody wrong in the room, it was me. And so I grew up with tremendous self-doubt and insecurity, because I obviously wasn't going to become a rock star, because I can't sing or do music. And it was really clear of a lot of things I wasn't going to become. And then my parents somehow had the brilliant idea of sending me to a prep school where they're preparing people for Harvard, Yale, all the
feeling
places
intensified,
wasn't going to get into.
Oh, geez.
But it was in that school that I started waking up in many ways, because the Vietnam War was going on. And one of the things I discovered early was nobody knew where Vietnam was, but they knew we should get in there and kill them all. But if you asked anybody, even somebody who's going to go to Harvard, and say, point to Vietnam on the map, they'd look, world map, they'd look at it like, no, that's Africa. So here we are going full force on a war in a country nobody knew where it was. And that's when I started questioning. That maybe I wasn't always the dumbest person in the room, because no matter how I looked at that, it never made sense. And nobody, even an admiral I talked to once, nobody could make sense of it. And then in Life magazine, you sit there, I ran across somebody named Timothy Leary in the experiments at Harvard. And that was wonderful at that time, because hardly anybody had heard about Enlightenment and Buddhism.
This gives you a guaranteed glimpse on a certain level.
Tim, Richard Alpert. saying, we have a little pill here. If you take this,
Yeah.
brings enlightenment. So my mind went towards that, and that all that helped. It started me questioning that maybe, just maybe, I'm not
Yeah.
always the dumbest guy in the room.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
Vietnam War kept escalating, and it became more and more clear. But that's
Yeah.
when, along with the psychedelics, I got deeply involved in Zen and yoga and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. It shows what the, at very least, it shows what the brain and mind are capable of doing, or the energy even. Because even if you take a psychedelic, there is some level of Kundalini activity that gets activated, even though it's not, it's kind of forced. So it might manifest as like
Temporary.
back
Yeah.
pain or something, but
Yeah, it's a
it's
temporary.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the place where I have to be very careful when I talk about psychedelics, but there's so people so deeply encapsulated in their belief systems, so deeply
That'll
encapsulated,
shake them out of that reality tunnel.
and
Yeah.
talking with them isn't going to do anything.
Right. Right.
Giving them 300 micrograms
Good
of
point.
LSD and then talking to them in 2 hours,
Yeah.
very different.
It's
And I did that.
definitely going to do something.
Yeah, I did that with psych
Some.
professors and others. They definitely ended up
Yeah.
much more open-minded than before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah. According to the research, there's these, kind of like electrical rivers that run through the brain, and there are habitual patterns of using the brain a certain way. And when you take something like LSD or magic mushrooms, that electrical river gets more evenly distributed throughout it kind of breaks you free from the cultural narrative just enough
Yes,
to realize, like, oh, all of culture is technically bullshit. Oh, okay.
right. And it also, they thought it made the brain more active, but it actually decreases activity. So the filters are gone. So
Yeah.
normally we're filtering out so much stuff. And then with the right psychedelic, those filters start getting turned off. And so
Yeah.
we're starting to experience everything much more rawly, without
Yeah.
filter,
Exactly.
without interpretation. And you start seeing things, like alive. Everything's alive.
Yeah.
Everything's alive.
Vibrant. And
Yeah.
also, I would say the kind of the wall between one of those filters is the wall between the conscious and the subconscious mind. So it's almost like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they bleed through each other in that state, And I noticed the similarity between that state and Sokchen and
Yes.
awakening is that you suddenly become aware of your entire peripheral vision all at once, and you're not really looking at any one thing in particular. You're seeing all of everything all at once. A more spacious, open-ended, attentional view of things,
But
and that there's
initially,
something to
yes.
do.
Yes. What happens with Dzogchen, or any form of, which is Dzogchen ultimately is a profound relaxation or opening, a profound resting, is we've been trained to repress so much of our subconscious stuff that we have to keep a level of tension to keep it out of our conscious awareness. And when we relax that, all these feelings and thoughts come flooding up. And a lot of people feel like they're going crazy, but all they've done is take that repressive mechanism, let it relax.
Ah.
And so one of the reasons people don't like to meditate is sooner or later you open enough that all this stuff starts flooding up, and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And people say, my mind's not getting quieter, it's getting worse. Well, it's not
It's
really
like a
getting
dark
worse.
night. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been there. You're just cleaning, it's like
Yeah.
cleaning the house.
Yeah.
All
You've
that
just been
garbage and
suppressing
all
it.
that dust
Yeah.
has always been
Sweeping
there.
it under the rug. Now it's actually trying to process and resolve itself,
Yeah,
so that you can have a more permanent default state of peace. Yeah.
yes, yes,
It's like a self-correcting mechanism. It's trying to do the work for you, but to the seeking mind, it goes, "Oh, I must be. Meditation is backfiring because now I feel depressed." And it's like,
right,
well, I'm
right.
having all these horrible memories and thoughts, and it's like, well, yeah, because you never actually sat with it and processed
Yeah,
it and allowed yourself to feel it, or allowed yourself to think it. And the moment you allow yourself to sit with it, think it, and feel it, it resolves itself. You don't have to
It disappears.
process it anymore. Yeah.
Right. It disappears. That's the thing, is that just if you're not creating a story around it, trying to control it, manipulate it, do anything with it, you just totally accept it, it disappears because there's nothing holding it.
The moment you allow it and the resistance isn't there, it resolves itself. It's like the resistance to it was what kept it locked in place for years, for decades, for half a century, however long it was.
Right.
And if you actually just felt it and dealt with it, it would.
Right.
Don't worry about it anymore.
Tissues, it's everywhere. Yeah. You can actually be younger after meditation.
Yeah. Awakening is like being a baby.
Yeah.
You know?
Like well, there is a vulnerability. Again, that's one of the reasons it's people feel that vulnerability and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
We were writing somewhere. You wrote something, I responded. I can't remember what you said, but something about the open heart or compassion or something, but it's the vulnerability. I mean, you're just like defenseless.
Yeah.
In certain human
armorless. Yeah.
Huh?
Armorlessness.
Yes. Yeah. And that's but if your whole investment isn't in surviving at any level, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, you see Jesus basically nailed himself to the cross. He didn't care. He was beyond the fear of death. So he's like, okay, fine. Yeah. See what you guys are doing yourselves. Yeah. See what's happening here. Look what you do to a sage. Look what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. He could have walked away. He could have ran away. He didn't. He might have even faked his own death. That's another story. But you have Socrates, who was like 73 at the time. And for those times in Greece, that was a ripe old age at those times in Greece. So he was like, okay, like, hell, I already made it 73. I'll make a final statement. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm real scared. Yeah, let me take it. Here, let me slam this down real quick without hesitating. And the moment they walked in the room with the hemlock, he said, the cure. He said, the pharmacon, the antidote to life. Oh. And his idea was basically like, why would I be afraid of something that I don't know? We don't even know what it is or if it is. We don't even know if there is death. And what if it keeps going and it's fucking wonderful? How do I know what happens? Why would I be afraid of it?
Right.
And yet, what the seeker interprets as the fear of death isn't actually the fear of the physical body dying. It's the fear of the mind realizing its own non-existent illusory nature. And
yet, Andrew, every night, we disappear. I think the dream and deep sleep are real. They're like super teachings every night. We disappear. Our world disappears. Our politics disappear. Our religion, everything we think we are totally disappears. Hopefully, if you go into deep sleep, and there's nothing but the dazzling darkness. And then in dreams, there's the character me in the dream, but who's watching the character me in the dream?
Yeah.
And it's all dreams are magical. I couldn't create some of the dreams I have. I don't have enough in my conscious mind, enough imagination to create the subtlety. Who or what's doing that?
It's all dream yoga. I remember as a seeker, I used to say to people when I was probably about a teenager, I say, if I'm the one in the dream, experiencing the dream, then who the hell created it?
Right.
Or the way Rupert Spear would put it, he'd say, in order for there to be a dream world, there has to be a dream character experiencing a dream world. And just like in your dreams at night, where you're always somebody experiencing a dream world, that's what this is. It's like the same thing. Yeah.
We used to do a dream yoga and what we call the Hara training. Hara meaning gut. And what we do is we get everybody to buy their own crystal. And then they hold the crystal in meditation. If they use mantras, they empower it with mantras. But basically, they purify the crystal first by putting in a stream, letting water take. So crystal's whole program. And so they cleanse the crystal first, and then they hold it. And we usually use the mantra because that's spiritual power in a sound structure. And they'd hold it every time they meditated for a week, putting their energy pattern. What was it? You said signature. Their energy signature in it.
Yeah.
And then in darkness and night, we go out in the woods to the big tree. The big tree is the oldest longleaf pine in the South. It's been around for hundreds of years. And so anybody who wants crystals, this is where you can go for free. And we dig holes and everybody bury their own crystal. And then at night, when they go to sleep to do dream yoga, they focus on their crystal. And they focus on going out to the big tree and getting their crystal in the dream. Let the crystal pull them there. And then see if there's anybody else in the class out there.
Oh, that is so interesting.
And if they run into somebody, they're not supposed to tell them. They're only supposed to tell me. So they can't, they can't get these stories going. They only tell me. And it's amazing, what would happen.
Wow. That's brilliant.
And how they'd report it.
That's really cool. And a lot of my energy work and trance work as a teenager was trying to have an astral projection experience for years and years and years, never having one. And I came very close to like consciously projecting out of the body in really intense vibrations in like sleep paralysis type states and things like that. But then the fear would grip me because I'm half asleep in that state. And you're like, maybe I'll die. Maybe the body will die if I do this. So no, I don't want to. Yeah, and that too. Yeah, but I feel like that preparatory work helped.
Try a crystal. Just put your energy in it, whatever way works for you, and then put it somewhere other than where you are. And at night,
like an anchor. That's a very interesting. I never thought of that.
With the intent that I'm going to go get the crystal. What'll really freak you out is if you wake up someday and the crystal's on your bedside table.
Yeah.
And you got it in your dream.
Go sleepwalking. No. That's some of the people that say like the ghosts are rearranging my house. They get the camera out and they're just sleepwalking, doing weird things. Like, oh, the ghosts. There's two ways to look at things.
Itself
Not that I'm trying to debunk it, but there's always, like you said before, like there's a part of the mind that can trick itself, and the other part that's like even if you're aware of that, no, that's still spooky. Like, no, what was that? Even though, and for example, some of the stuff I talk about sounds a little too spooky, and some of it sounds a little too woo-woo. It all depends on who's listening and why. But after awakening, I noticed, like, I've always been very, very in touch with detecting the subtlety of life force energy. But after awakening, it was far more potent. I remember thinking, oh, that's why all these like energetic maps and everything were for. Like, this is for the awakened state. It's so not subtle now that you can just effortlessly use this energy. But I also noticed that, like, if I pick up a crystal, I immediately can feel, which I know it sounds like hippie woo-woo shit to some people, but it's my lived experience. So, hey. But now, like, it's always been that way, you can feel it. But now it's like, oh wow, I can really feel like it's not subtle anymore.
That's why you have to clean them, because those crystals are programmed. Whoever's been handling them and stuff, so you have to a running stream and just putting it in there and let the water will help cleanse the crystals. So then it's like back to factory setting.
Yeah, factory default state. Yeah.
You can hold it and put your own,
And it's funny because when I was studying the crystal skulls as a seeker, you suddenly realize that the largest crystal company in the world is Hewlett-Packard, and that that technically that's how a lot of different things within computers and things work, is they are directly actually storing information in crystals, which is really funny to learn.
That's interesting. I remember the crystal radio sets we used to have as kids.
Oh yeah, piezoelectrical, and there's even citrine crystals 2 to 20 nanometers in length covering the pineal gland. There's little crystals just totally encrusting the pineal gland, piezoelectrical antennae, if you will, for that.
And that may be where DMT's released.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt here that's the case. No doubt at all. People go, oh, maybe it's the twos. Like, not even Rick. Like, don't get me wrong. I wanted to become a behavioral neuroscientist and be Rick Strassman's errand boy for the longest time. I'll be his assistant. Like, oh, this is the good stuff. All of that aside, my own experiences have. I had the pineal gland directly release endogenous DMT multiple times now, where there's no question that's what's happening. I don't see how it could be the tissues. It's too directly connected to that. Like, I'll have the chakras light up one by one, and then when that one lights up, suddenly I'm having a DMT experience. Like, you're not going to tell me that's not directly correlated immediately directly. Like there's no question in my mind. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So technically, the pineal gland actually transmutes, L-tryptophan into 5-HTP, into serotonin, into melatonin, into pinoline. And pinoline is like hypnagogic imagery as you fall asleep. And then it transmutes it into 5-MeO-DMT, which is like lucid dreaming. And then it transmutes it into NN-DMT, which is like near-death experience or samadhi. And yeah, there's no question in my mind. Yet I was taking extra neuroscience classes in college and things, and I pick up the textbook and I flip the pineal gland and it says produces serotonin, melatonin, makes you sleepy or not. And it's like, that's the entirety of, really? This is the textbook on this for like even like the neuroscience majors. I was taking classes for even though I wasn't the neuroscience major, I was taking extra classes just because why not? Second hardest class next to organic chemistry, and one sentence in the whole book about the pineal gland. And here I know all these. I'm like, well, what? Like,
Well,
come
see,
on.
there's a very important point is neuroscience and physics and other fields progress so rapidly that the paradigm we learned 2 years ago is not the current paradigm.
Yeah.
And what neuroscientists said with authority, or physicists a few years ago, they would not stand by today.
Yeah. What they say with the utmost confidence, 4 years later, they'd be embarrassed to ever say that again. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing that excites me, I talk about this in Satsang all the time, is how many scientists are awakening. So we have these people who are very well, even this woman Rick interviewed this week, she's a, what do you call it, like people who are psychic and channel, but she's a real scientist. She can talk about her own personal experiences and stuff, but training channels, whatever she calls them, is scientific. But scientists who are so intelligent and gone to the best universities in the world and have been invested in scientific research, and then they wake up and it blows their freaking minds.
Or the brain surgeon has his own near-death experience and goes, okay, I was wrong, it's not chemicals. Like, oh, that changed your tune. You just tried to debunk 100 of those with the utmost confidence because you're the brain surgeon. And then you had your own, like, I was wrong, it's real. Like, well, that was quick.
This one guy he wasn't a scientist, but he's atheist materialist, had his own tech company. He was a billionaire. So he goes to Lake Tahoe with his family for Christmas, and he gets up in the middle of the night for a glass of water, drinks the water, goes back to bed, has a full-blown Kundalini awakening. He doesn't experience unconditional love. He became unconditional love. He just lay there, pure, infinite, eternal, unconditional love. And then he came back in the body, and he and his wife immediately created a foundation to research. He goes, man, that was so far off my map. And he wants to know what happened, and that's great. I mean, those are the type of people. With the money and the scientific background to investigate these things and to bring them on our map. But the map changes so rapidly, and I still have people arguing in science, like you said, with neuroscience. It's like, man, that's like 5 paradigms ago.
Yeah, exactly. That's Legos. What are you doing? We're trying to build a house. You brought Legos? What's happening here? The brain. There isn't even a brain. Even the brain is dreamt up, by the clear light, if you will. Yeah. That's funny.
Right. It's hard to explain how it is a lot like we are simulations in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, literally, and I always thought it was funny. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, composed of white light, and that's I don't know how much of my Kundalini experience you've heard in the videos and stuff, but yeah, that it was directly shown to me at 24 that that's the case, and I always thought it was funny when I saw that body of light because it's like the game The Sims, There's a diamond-shaped thing over there, I'm just literally like, this is a really advanced, like, I'm a sim. Okay, funny. Hey, real funny, It's like a bad Sims joke. Like, oh, really? That's the shape? Really? Okay, sure. I'm a sim. Okay, yeah, fair enough. In a way.
But it's very relaxing being a sim.
It is, yeah.
It's just like, okay, just just relax into it.
People are like, man, this message sounds dark. You're saying you're a simulation. You're saying you're a robot. You're saying there's nobody there. It's like, no, this is not. It only sounds spooky to the mind because of what it's the delusion that it's used to. It's used to the
Right.
delusion that it's under control. Or the way I like to put it, we don't move the Kundalini moves us.
Yeah, we don't awaken
So
the Kundalini.
yeah,
She awakens us. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely. It's really interesting to see it from the other perspective.
Yeah, it's so different that I was the one fighting the people that were saying the same shit I'm saying now. I was the one flipping out, going, "No, that's not right. You got to keep going. That's not enlightenment. That's not no." And now I'm like, "Yeah, like I used to be that guy, so I understand where you're coming from." I'm like, "No, you don't understand." I'm like, "No, yeah, I remember." Like, "No, you didn't." Like, okay, I've been there. I understand. I understand. I haven't lost touch with it. We even sages remember the suffering. It's not like we lost our ability to remember how rough it was or something.
I think that's what makes a good teacher is you remember being there doing that.
Yeah,
Is you can appreciate where somebody's getting really
yeah.
invested in arguing and
And why?
trying to
Yeah,
produce evidence, and you're
yeah,
deluded, and this is like fine, but
yeah.
have you considered this?
I was the
Have
guy
you
flipping out, saying, "What do you
considered
mean you
that
don't
you've
exist?"
never experienced anything out of your own awareness? Just
Yeah, yeah.
be honest. That's my major teaching, just be honest. Be honest.
Right,
And that
right. Be
cuts
honest
through.
with yourself. Or as Milarepa said, my religion is not deceiving myself.
Yeah. And it's really very simple once you get there.
It's obvious once it's obvious, but it's too subtle to detect until then,
It's
unfortunately.
too simple to detect. The mind loves complexity.
Yeah, it's terrifyingly simple. Like seeing, oh, I'm a geometric shape of light. Like that was actually kind of spooky. Out of
Sure.
all the spiritual experiences I had, that one in particular, I was like, oh, maybe I went a little too far, a little too quick. Like every other experience I had, I'm like, okay, like totally cold fade. Where the fuck is it? It's running 2 years late. Where 3 years late now? Where the fuck is it? And then that particular experience though, it was like, okay, I think I went a little too far, a little too. I'm a shape. Okay, and it's
But
far
only
simpler
sometimes.
than this shape. This shape is exquisitely complex. Now that I've seen how fucking simple that layer is, it's kind of terrifying how simple that was.
It's all theater.
Yeah, it's curtains and stage props all the way down.
Well said. Where did you grow up?
Oh, I traveled around. I was born and raised in Iowa until I was
So you're from.
about
Okay, that's cool.
originally, yeah. I'm originally from Iowa. I don't know if I'll end up staying here my whole life or anything, but I'm here now. Um, I've moved around. I've lived in. So when I was about 11 or 12, I moved to Pennsylvania, and then I stayed there until after I graduated college. So I was
Okay,
there a
that's
good
where I
good
sort
amount of
of
my life.
associated you with is Pennsylvania, I think,
Yeah. So
because
I,
I
I
made
went from
work
Iowa
there.
to Pennsylvania. Yeah. And I actually went to the University of Scranton, where like the show The Office is based on that town.
Oh,
They don't actually film it there, but it's kind of loosely based on making fun of that town in a way. So that was always kind of funny for us. Went to that university, like, oh yeah, The Office, like literally, oh, it's pretty popular show. Yeah, that's where I'm from, that type of thing. But then I moved to. I've lived in Kansas for a few years. I've lived in. I was up in British Columbia for a couple months. Lived
well, that's
in
cool.
Alabama for a few years. Florida for 6 or 7 months. And then back to Iowa. Who knows where I'll be next, but I'm here for now.
We really don't know. A lot of places I ended up, I never knew I'd be.
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, I ended up in Texas, friends with the Texas loner motorcycle gang. These days they're called clubs, but it was definitely a gang. And as I say, I liberated them from Lone Star beer and showed them another alternative. We would be out in the prairies looking for UFOs.
Yeah, nice.
And the head of the loners saved my life one day in a bar because
Wow.
this again was the 60s, and I walked in with long hair and everything, and they were going to kill me. And Bud, who is head of the Texas loners, comes in and puts his arm around me and goes, "This here's my friend." They go, "Oh, Bud, we didn't know." Oh my God.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So I was protected. And Bud was very interested in alternates, alternate consciousness, psychedelics and stuff. So
Yeah.
we had some really interesting people on Harleys out in the middle of the desert, hiring kites, looking in the skies, and we saw stuff. Who knows how much of it was real?
I was.
But we had all sorts of experiences.
So
And
what
I
did you
think it's
see?
like, almost any, for me, in California, Virginia, here, I see things going across the sky, not coming down, but going across and suddenly shifting position very, very rapidly. And at times I have the perception that we're connected. In other words, they're aware of me as much as I'm aware of them. In Texas, we saw a lot of those. We would see, I don't have very good eyesight, so I don't know what they saw, but it would be like star-sized things moving across the sky together, suddenly changing, shifting. And as far as I know, and I've been told by the Air Force has nothing that can just shift at right angles.
The pilot would turn to liquid. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no slowing down. They'd just be going along.
The pilot would be liquidated in an instant in our vehicles.
And so I saw that in Texas. Then I saw it a number of times in California and then in Virginia. And often had the sensation that they were aware of me. Whatever it is was as aware of me as I was of them. And again, if you watch them long enough, anybody can sit there. There was no explanation. I mean, they were UFOs, unidentified flying, but they were definitely shifting trajectories very, very rapidly.
And I know it sounds even. I see your woo woo and I raise you a whole other level because people are like, oh, okay, you're talking about aliens. And actually, Andrew then brings up time travel, because the thing about it is, when I was a seeker, one day I sat down, I'm like, this is a real complex issue of people devoting their lives to this phenomenon. I'm just going to sit here and think on it with pure logic, not intuition, not just with pure logic, and get to the bottom of this phenomenon. And what my brain came up with was that this has to be time traveling humans. It's like, why would they be interested in us all along? Well, it's us. It's like if an anthropologist had a time machine and went back and studied cavemen to find, for whatever reason. Well, people say things like, well, if there was time travel, there would always be evidence of time travel since before recorded human history. Yeah, we call it the ancient alien phenomenon. So the out of place artifacts, things like that, world cycles, all of this, to me, seems like human beings from the future coming back in time to at very least study what's happening. You could one up that and say it actually influenced things. But it would make sense then, like why they're coming back to pivotal moments in our history, because it's their history. Why they're coming back to certain events. And, supposedly somebody from Philip Corso or whoever was in charge of the kind of reverse engineering or cataloging of potential reverse engineering technologies from the Roswell crash. According to him, he said when they were doing the autopsy, the gray aliens were just humans from the future. If you ask an evolutionary anthropologist, what will humans look like 100,000 years from now? Well, the eyes will get bigger, the heads will get bigger, the muscles will be like, hey, wait a minute. You know what I mean? And he said that basically
somebody like that.
Yeah. I just saw someone like that last night. They took me on board. But no, if you peel that black, it comes off. It's like a contact lens, like an augmented reality contact lens that peels out, and there's a big human-looking eye underneath. They cut open the bodies, and they found basically more evolved human organ systems and things like that. And if you take all that seriously, then you start to realize, like, the cover up from the government's end isn't that there's secretly aliens and they know about it. That's the official story. The official story is that the government is covering up existence of aliens. And what they're actually hiding is evidence of time travel. And it solves every like riddle in the complexity of the UFO phenomenon, I think. That's also why they're called UFOs, because they're not actually spaceships, they're time machines. Like, they're time and space machines. They can be flown in the water, in the air, and in space, and through time, apparently. Because if you have a cool to the touch gravity generating engine, then you can bend time at that point. If you master space travel, you also exactly. Yeah,
I mean,
time,
time's
space.
not linear.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody got me to watch a video one night that's really good, and if I can find it, I'll send you the link. It was like it appeared like a documentary where they were talking about this guy studying time travel. But as you watch the documentary kept shifting because you didn't know it initially, but it had worked. So the documentary, when it began, as it goes on, it keeps shifting. And it was a dry movie because it was documentary like, and yet it's fascinating because it's dealing with time shifting and that people are coming back and changing things, including the documentary about time travel. And so I think it was pretty short, like an hour or something. And I think a bunch of college kids or somebody made it. So it's not like a high class Hollywood movie. It's just a really, if you're interested in time, I was sucked into it a lot more deeply. I mean, you probably get that too. I get tons of people sending me stuff, books to read, things to watch, blah, blah, blah. And I need a staff to just deal with it. But for some reason, this one may have been my cousin who sent it to me. This one hit me, and I did watch it, and it was much better than I thought.
Yeah, so I'll check that out if you send it.
If I can remember what it was and find it, I'll send it to you. And you don't have to watch it because I understand you're probably watch this, read this.
I take things you say with a little more, I listen to you a little more than I would listen to some random person, let me put it that way.
But whoever said this to me, that must have been the same thing because I did watch it, and I'm glad I did. It was done well enough to really make you look.
Another thing there too is like light and lightning. I usually bring this up about physics. Tesla just meditated on lightning, and that was his whole thing. Einstein just meditated on light, and that was his whole thing. And I've had experiences about both, right? But I've thought a lot about physics. But if you were going to create time travel, you'd most likely want to create some kind of Einstein-Rosen bridge that looped back into itself, type of thing. And that would only be possible because of what Einstein did while meditating about light. And what I find fascinating is the fact that light travels so fast. In other words, according to physics, from the perspective of the photon, time isn't moving.
Right.
And yet somehow the photon passed through time from the sun and hit my retina 8 minutes later, even though from the perspective of the photon, time isn't moving.
Nothing happened.
I would theorize then that the only way that's possible, and the reason light travels so fast, that light itself is somehow traveling backwards through time.
So one of the things with that is shifting reality tunnels, that photons are always already where they are. And it's our mind that gives the appearance of time, space. And so
it's funny because
we may come back from the future and visit this someday. No, you were wrong. No, I was right.
I used to joke around when I was a seeker. I still tried to, kind of march around like I was a guide toward enlightenment, even though I knew I hadn't gotten it yet. And some of the stuff I said was right, some of it was wrong, but it's funny. I used to screw with people. I've always had a good sense of humor about it. So I'd say, you really should listen to me and take what I'm saying seriously, because I remember my past life and I was you. And I remember this conversation now. So you really should pay attention. And they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, it doesn't work the way you think. You're going to be me in your next life, this lifetime. You're going to have this. And they're like, what? Just as a joke, to get them to like reevaluate the way they think about time and reincarnation. Like, no, it's more complex than you might think.
Have you ever seen the cartoon with the little kid sitting on the couch with the old man? And the little kid's turning to the old man. He goes, yeah, when I was your age, I didn't believe in reincarnation either.
Yeah, I did see that. I saw that one the other day. Yeah, a good name.
Did you know Tesla was a student of Vivekananda's?
No. I might have. I think I heard about that in passing.
Yeah,
and he was also born during a lightning storm.
Field theory, and he got that from Vivekananda. And for me, I was reading when I was a teenager, Jnana Yoga by Vivekananda. And I suddenly realized he was pretty much expressing Einstein's theory of relativity about 40 years before Einstein did.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was talking about time, space, the Kasha, field, and everything. I'm sitting there going, whoa, man.
I forget where I read it, but it was something like in one of Tesla's journals or something. He had all these Sanskrit terms from like all these old books. I forget what it was, maybe the Sri Bhagavatam or something like that. And he's going through it and it's like, wait, what? And you see that a lot. I wouldn't call it stealing, but you see a lot of kind of borrowing of ideas and then rebranding from the East to the West in the early Greeks and in like people like, for example, Nietzsche's mentor was Schopenhauer, and Schopenhauer was like the foremost European expert on Buddhism. And now you have philosophers going, wow, how interesting. Nietzsche and Buddhism go together. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's why everything just gets filtered over and rebranded like it was their own unique idea. And it's like, well, it's not quite right.
Yeah, and it's not really stealing because I think who knows where humans came from and how they developed, but I think it seems even way back in history, people were waking up. And when they woke up, all they had is words of their culture to express it.
Yeah, exactly.
And all words are so limited. And so they express these things, and most people don't understand what they're talking about. And then somebody in another culture many years later discovers the same thing, and they see, oh my God, could that person back then have meant like this? And so they do see, it's amazing, like in Kashmir Shaivism, how close in the Sponda theory they're describing quantum physics today. So from my point of view, I personally suspect sages like Shemaraj and stuff saw the same thing, but they only had the language of their time to express it.
Right.
Yeah, and so when they're talking about Sponda and everything's just conscious energy, that's pretty much where quantum physicists are.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the funny thing about it is, a sage could probably explain quantum physics in about 7 seconds. Any one of us. And the quantum physicists are like, oh, it's real. If you think you understand it, you don't. It's like, well, the observer is the observed. Where's the riddle?
Right. Well, it's an understanding. It's not the understanding. It's seeing it. It's pratyabhijna. It's recognizing it. It's
not knowing it or understanding it or believing
having it fit, because that's not going to happen. The seeing it.
The mind can't see this. Yeah.
Right. The thinking mind can't see it.
That which sees this goes beyond the parameters or limits of the mind.
Right.
And the mind never leaves those limits. And so the mind can never see this. The seeker can never see this
right.
as an obvious the observer is the observed. So of course all these spooky phenomenon oh wow, when we observed it changed. Yeah, because what you're observing is you. And what you're observing with is you. And none of this is actually what it seems to be.
As I say, it's not really totally accurate, but we're dreaming it.
Yeah. Or as I was going to say too, you said about the cultural differences, like the Buddha might say it's a dream, and you and I might say it's a simulation.
Right.
And because of our cultural
Right.
context, and the way I like to put that too is like there's actually no human word for what this is, because all human words were invented by the mind dualistically. And so
To
it's
make
not a
this,
dream, and it's not a dream, it's not a simulation, it's not a simulation.
those are pointers, yeah. And
Yeah.
so somebody can consider what we're saying and suddenly see it. And then they know that those were just pointers.
Yeah.
See, that's the hard thing too in this work we do is when people start arguing with me about the pointers, it's like, I don't want to argue with you about a pointer. It's like, again, Zen said it,
That's
the
what I was gonna
finger
say
pointing to
next.
the
Yeah.
moon. I'm trying to get you to look up there and you're arguing with me about the freaking
Yeah.
finger. I don't care if
Yeah,
you're
but that's
right
your
or
left
wrong about
hand.
the
It's
finger.
like, okay.
Yeah.
And left
Yeah.
means wrong, so you're wrong. Like, no. Yeah. Yeah, that's like, well, I feel threatened. Yeah, because you are being threatened. Your very identity is being threatened
Right.
by a sharp sword wielding samurai ninja. Yeah.
Right.
That you're going to be beheaded. Yes.
Well, that's why I think everybody's exactly where they are, and I always invite people to tell me what they really, really, really want, because what they really, really, really want most of the time is not this.
Yeah.
They want a better
True.
dream, and that's fine. I know how to help people have
Yeah.
better dreams. It's actually
Yeah.
it's actually a lot easier to help somebody have a better dream.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not. I used to think the purpose was to awaken. That's not quite right. Purpose is kind of to. There's no purpose. Obviously, there'd be a limit, but it's to enjoy. So it's enjoying the unawakened state, and it's enjoying the awakened state, and it's enjoying the illusion, and the romance, and the ignorance in a good way, the successful confusion, as I put it. It's enjoying the successful confusion, or the way I think
Very
I heard Jan
successful.
Espen put it once. He said, we're coils of ignorance. I thought, yeah, because like you're saying, it's like, or the way I put it is, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Like, you can remember this metaphysically too. It works because it seems to spiral down and compress kind of clockwise, and when it spirals up, it's like this counterclockwise, like you're going before time. All the metaphors are embedded in that. All the synchronicities are embedded in that. And that's how I've directly experienced it, at very least. So we can only really talk from our own apparent lived experience. Yeah.
And some people, for whatever reasons, are thrown into nothing will satisfy them except awakening. And it's not
That's
them
how I was.
it's not them doing it. Yeah, it's that driven
Yeah.
force.
And that's how it always has
power.
been. Yeah.
Right. And
For
some
my
people
story, it's
accept,
exactly what it was. Yeah.
yeah, it's very there's no rest, no satisfaction until
Ever.
it's
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
And
Now there is.
when people have that, then it can happen, like you said, it can be very sudden.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they don't have that, if they have something else, then maybe they need to become part of an organization, or they need to do this or that or whatever, and it's all fine because it's all the same thing. But that's the clarification, is to hear where people are coming from and what they really, really,
Yeah.
really want.
And it's an energetic feeling tone that shifts, and that's what's guiding the seeking and the suffering, is an energetic feeling tone. It's not that the sage knows something or understands something or believes, is that they feel different now, and because of how they now feel different, basically permanently for the rest of the lifetime at very least, everything's different now, because that feeling is
Yes.
you feel complete. And it's ironic because the seeker feels empty, and the sage realizes emptiness, which allows for a feeling of completion or fullness, which is ironic. But yeah, for me, it was like, it's almost like, so in other words, that feeling tone is like, how desperate is that feeling? Like how intense is that feeling of how intensely unsatisfied is that energy feeling? And that's why at age 8, I could articulate, I feel as though I'm separate from the rest of the universe, therefore I'm depressed and feel lonely. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
8-year-old
Yeah.
said that? Are you fucking with me, Andrew? You actually said, yeah, that's how I put it. Like, it's like, wow, okay.
Well, that's
The
great. Yeah.
most,
Eight,
so
8 years. That's very young. And it's also when somebody's awake, well, sometimes they're not laughing at the student, but they're laughing joyously because even though the student is in great pain and suffering, they know what good news that is
yeah,
because
yeah, exactly.
that's
Oh, this is a
that's
good
going to get
sign.
them
Yeah,
awake. That's going to get them awake.
exactly.
And so people go,
Yeah.
I've lost everything. I don't want to go to work.
Oh,
I'm a
good.
doctor. I don't want to go to work, and I don't want to do this. My wife wants to go to Nova Scotia for the vacation. I don't want to. I just want to sit and I just want to know what's really true. And you go,
Oh, good.
great.
It's a good sign. Yeah, they don't expect that. They say, yeah, so I feel my life is crumbling. Yeah, you're gonna have to lose everything to fit through the eye
Yeah,
of the needle. I'm like, wait, what? Yeah, you have to lose everything, including you.
yeah.
And enlightenment is losing everything.
Yes.
Um, so
It's
there's a
so that's an important point. Is it's not shifting identification. It's releasing all identification.
it's a
It's
shift
not
from
moving
identification. Yeah,
from I'm this person to now I'm an enlightened person.
yeah.
It's all gone. There's nothing left to grasp.
I am not. It's from
Right.
I am to I am not. It's from I to no I. Yeah. And so it's in between moments where there isn't somebody that enters the flow state, the awakened mind, and it's not just dreamless sleep. Highway hypnosis can do the same thing. Someone's driving, and it's like, say, if someone's in the seeking energy. If a sage does it, it's different because you're kind of always just present, even as you come and go, as the apparent personality comes and goes. There's this background presence. This always is. And so even if a sage spaces out, you're still there as that presence. But when a seeker spaces out, they suddenly go, oh, where did I go there for a minute? Oh, I lost time. There's a time vortex on that highway. And I'm freaked out because the car successfully, safely drove itself home. And where the fuck was I the last 10 minutes? And they're spooked by that. The same way they're spooked by the fear of death, that they call the fear of death anyway.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It is that they're not accessing that presence directly while they are spaced out. The sage will be present and conscious without a personality while the car is driving itself, while the body's driving the car. And they don't go, so it's a little different, but seekers might notice that sages are kind of space out more often. It's because we're kind of accessing that pristine awareness, that awareness of awareness. That's just, there's nothing there, there's no point, but it's inherently enjoyable and peaceful. And so sometimes it happens. It's
Yeah.
like a reset button.
Most human thinking is about propping up a false self. And so I still wonder about this, but some thinking can happen because it's pragmatic or useful. Where do I want to do this or this first? Whatever, it's
Yeah.
pragmatic. But my estimates are about 85% of our thinking is propping up a false
Yeah.
reality. And when there's
Sure.
no need to do that, there's a lot more silence. And she doesn't do it anymore, but Bonnie walk in the room, go, what are you doing? And it's like,
Hi, how are you? So what have you been doing lately? He's like, no, I don't see it that way. Yeah,
but
how
there
do I
is
answer?
presence. There is
Yeah.
presence, but there's not anything happening. And then if she says, well, it's time for dinner or whatever, that's fine. We to watch TV,
Yeah.
Did you see that thing? I don't know if I sent it to you. I posted online on Facebook on Frasier, Niles getting enlightened.
No.
It's on there.
I used to like that show though. It's funny.
I was sitting there. We're having lunch and we're sort of watching reruns of Frasier. I'm half asleep, and all of a sudden they're talking about a spelling bee, and Niles is in there with Frasier's son, and what's his name? I can't remember. He said, Frederick, why did he said to Niles, why did you not answer the last question in the spelling bee? And basically, the way is because Niles got enlightened. There was no need to answer the question. So Niles does this riff with Frederick where he goes, I was standing there. And then suddenly, I can't read, but suddenly I knew I can't misspell, it's the whole, and he uses his hands. He just does this whole, and then it was all reduced to the one. And then the one was reduced to nothing. Yes. And I'm sitting here going, Bonnie, Niles is fucking.
Are you recording this?
So unfortunately, guess what? I wasn't the first person to realize that. So they have that little part in YouTube.
Yeah, good.
And I'll send it to you. But I was interesting because I'm sitting there and go, man, they had some writer that day. But like I said,
every so often I'll be watching TV and they'll do that. And I'll go, who's seeing this? Nobody's okay. Yeah. It's funny to see it in like random pop culture for the masses. Yeah. You least expect it to pop up there. I can't think of his name, but the guy who wrote Big Bang and a lot of the other sitcoms, he's been involved in exploring non-duality and stuff. And that was one of the other ones I saw the other day watching Big Bang Theory. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah, wow. He slips a lot of stuff in his shows,
That makes sense.
And it's really interesting. But wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then there was one guy, I can't remember the names, but in Gilmore Girls, for the dumbest guy, suddenly accurately explains quantum physics to everybody. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Just sitting there. So
it reminds me, we were talking about 33 and Freemasonry and pop culture. It just reminded me of The Simpsons and Futurama, and I was talking about time travel. Matt Groening, the guy who wrote The Simpsons and Futurama, was a 33rd degree Freemason. Huh. And if you ask a Freemason, so how long has Freemasonry been? They'll say, since time immemorial. Hey, wait a minute. You guys know something about this time travel? I think maybe. It's funny because he wrote The Simpsons, and by my estimation, it's like The Simpsons is like making fun of the masses for the masses, but also for the people that And then Futurama is like the other way around. Like he's giving away the secrets, like tongue in cheek in code, if you're paying attention. And so I've wondered about that.
I've never seen either one of them.
Oh.
So would you recommend Futurama?
I like it. Yeah, I like it better than Simpsons.
Is it cartoons or what do you call it? Illustrated?
Yeah, it's a cartoon. Animation.
Yeah. Animation. That's it.
We are animations. I like to use animator / Freemasonic ways to talk about the mystical retracting. But I say things like I say things like, Mickey Mouse will never see Walt Disney's face. Or I'll say, we're like the animations of the animators. That's why we're called animals, Or I'll say something like, we can trace ourselves back to the drawing board of the architect, but no further.
I used to use Mickey Mouse as a koan. The koan is Mickey Mouse real or not? If he's not real, how come everybody knows who I'm talking about?
Yeah. He's right there. He's waving. See, he's doer.
Everybody recognizes him.
He's consciously experiencing. He's aware, and he's doing something, right? Yeah. And he chose to wave, right? Oh.
So that was the koan. Is Mickey Mouse real or not?
Yeah, I actually say something very similar all the time. I always say, self's like Mickey Mouse or Santa Claus, And we're like characters in a book. We're like Sims. Yeah.
Sims.
You can flip free will on and off in The Sims. It doesn't mean there's somebody there consciously experiencing. Or another way I put it is that it isn't we aren't experiencing anything. That silent witness that lurks behind all of us, that's witnessing. That's the non-dual pristine awareness that's witnessing. It's experiencing. We're not even aware. We're not even experiencing anything. We're not feeling anything. It is. Your nerves don't feel things. You do. Your brain isn't perceiving, you are. And that you that's perceiving over there is perceiving over here. And yeah, that freaks people out though, because they think like, oh, upon awakening, there's no qualia. No, that's not what we're saying. Oh, you're just a corpse walking around or something. The way you're talking is spooking me. Yeah, no, that's not it. It's not actually scary. It's just sounds scary to the way the mind interprets reality. Yeah. Or the way the Tao Te Ching puts it, it says, and then the self is gone without danger. Or it says, whose child is this? Because we're all like little action figures or Barbie dolls or something of the Lord type of thing. It's like we're being moved. Or if I'll concede sometimes a little bit with the in between Kashmir Shaivism and radical non-duality. I say, oh, there's a doer, all right. It's just not one of us.
All right. It's so part of the game is the sensation that we, the embodied entity, is a doer. Yeah. And you don't want to monkey with that unless somebody is willing to look, because it just cause confusion.
Yeah. Goes so against the grain of the mind.
So one of the reasons I ended up with Muktananda, do you know who he is?
Yeah. Yeah, he's got
I was studying Zen, and the koan I was working on had to do with shunyata, or emptiness. And I was getting a pretty good glimpse. So very early on, when I first met Muktananda, he had a long line of people. He had his peacock feathers. He's bopping people. And I walked up in line, and I said I had a question for him. So they made me stand to the side while other people kept coming up. And then one of the swamis said, all right, what's your question? And I said, is shunyata the final realization? Emptiness. Muktananda said no. He looked at me for a few moments, then he went back to bopping people. He said no. And then I said, well, what is the final realization? He said, the knower of shunyata. And I popped. After all the years in Zen, I popped more. I had bigger satori right at that moment. Baba looked at me and saw it, and he just laughed and kept popping people.
Yeah, I remember you telling that story in the Buddha at the Gas Pump interview that I watched of you. I remember that sticking
out.
Did
I? Yeah. Oh, good.
I think so. I remember hearing it somewhere.
I know I tell it because it was significant for me.
Yeah, I love it. That's cool.
Yeah, but that was a real
did that feel like a pineal gland DMT release as well? Was it kind of have a trippy or a subtle trippy component to it at all, or no?
The only way I can talk about it is in retrospect, because when it actually happened, I was that. That's why. So there was, and then you come out of that, and then you start thinking about it. What the heck happened, and why didn't I have satori's like that in Zen?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things I always liked about Adyashanti's message that seemed to really like link up with my own. Is like he tried Zen for years and years and years and years and years. That's how I was too. And then he's like switched into Advaita, and something else clicked into place. And I always felt a very similar way. But also, I like. There's a very important side to this Kundalini Shaktipat type transmission as well. I think that's it's too neglected and not spoken of too much in the radical non-duality community. That's why I'm kind of in between worlds on all this stuff,
Have you looked into Shaivism, Kashmir Shaivism? You have to find the right people who can translate it into fairly modern terms. But to see that satori with Muktananda, again, after the fact, I think it was his Shakti that got me to say, I think if somebody else said exactly what he said, it wouldn't have happened.
That's what the peacock is to me, is a Shakti. Symbol of Kundalini. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that his morphic field, when he said that, he was saying that in that awareness, and he transmitted me into that awareness.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I wonder if anybody else would point out the exact same thing, whether it would have happened. But he's there. And see, a lot of my friends don't, and I use these words again, you know what they mean. They don't believe in transmission. They don't believe in transmission, that somebody can be in an incredible state of consciousness. And it's not like they do it. but the field invites others into
it. Just happens. Yeah.
Yeah, they're invited into. And so
Yeah.
they're not going around going, "Oh man, I'm cool. I'm giving people
Yeah,
shit."
I've
It's just
I've received and given those transmissions, so there's no
yes.
doubt here. And yet we probably have plenty of sages on our mutual friends list that are, if they heard this right now and they're what, they go, "Oh bullshit," because they haven't
Oh, Andrew,
experienced
I
that.
have a lot of friends who would be freaked out by this whole conversation.
Yeah.
But
Well,
see,
we
I
used
feel
to have
clear
friends.
you and
Now
I
they're
know
gonna
what
see
we're
this though.
talking about. We're not most of the stuff we're talking about is fun. It's reality
Yeah.
tunnels. And it's not like,
Yeah.
it's just exploring what's
Yeah.
out there. And I think we're really clear about the clarity of awakening. And like you say, I think Shaktipat enables stuff, or the Shakti enables stuff to happen that might not happen. It's like psychedelics.
Yeah.
A person is locked into an energy field, and when they get into a higher vibrating field, they just dissolve. And there's a whole
Yeah.
possibility there that they didn't even know existed.
And for me, it was integral to it because, first of all, like psychedelics give glimpses, obviously, but so does Shaktipat and
Yes.
the sparking off of that spontaneously or consciously transmitted, and the glimpses that that gives. You have these moments of grace that are, they're fleeting. They might last 5-10 minutes, might last an hour, a couple of days, depends. But they show you that. They show you things
The
like
realization.
oh, the body's moving itself. There's no free
Yeah.
will. There's no agency. Like even without awakening, Kundalini can show you that as a glimpse, at very least.
Yes.
And
So
the
the
mind can just
experience
shut
may
off
go
for a moment.
away, but the
Yeah.
realization doesn't go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, is once you see that you're being lived, you may not have the direct experience of that, but you've seen it and you know it's true, even if you can't necessarily access it in this moment. You've still seen it. You've still seen it.
And then
And
upon
so that
awakening,
never leads you.
you said 85%. Usually I say 90%. So it's pretty much the same
Same
thing.
ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. But yeah, that's what I always said. Upon awakening, it's like there were no thoughts. The only thoughts that arrived like were thoughts about the fact that there were no thoughts. So the first week after awakening, I'd be the body would start walking around the yard outside, and the mind would go, "Oh wow, look, the legs are just moving. There's no thoughts before that. Isn't that interesting?" Like that's the only thoughts in a 10-minute period was, "Oh look, the body's just moving on its own, even though there were no thoughts before it." Huh? Like that's the only thought that arises. Things like that. You're like, "Oh wow, look what the body's doing now on its own. Interesting." Huh? Like the only thoughts are like commentaries. So it's still the mind, but but there's 10 times less thoughts.
Yeah.
There's still apparent choice from a sage's perspective. There's still thoughts. A sage might still flip out or something. It just takes more to get to that point, or it takes more to cross the threshold of reactivity, and on
It's
a certain
much less
level,
investment in anything.
yeah, exactly. And if you did, it wouldn't. Yeah, so what? None of it means anything. It's just happening. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think one of the awakenings that I call when cathexis ended, I was still living at a spiritual center, and I think a lot of people perceive me as depressed because I wasn't invested in anything. And this shouldn't be taken wrong, but I didn't care about anything. That doesn't mean
exactly.
That doesn't mean what people think.
Exactly.
If people wanted to come in and chant, they could come in and chant. If they didn't come in and chant, they don't have to come in. It doesn't matter a bit to me what was going on. But the investment in propping up that whole system was gone, including propping up my level of involvement. And so a lot of people thought there was depression, but it wasn't. There was no one around to get depressed.
People always say it to me like, "Oh, that's not awake. You're experiencing depersonalization disorder." So, well, first of all, that would be something someone would suffer from. So no. That there's an overlap there. I could see why those would look identical twins.
Yeah, psychiatry could easily diagnose that.
They say, well, that's derealization, depersonalization disorder, etc. And yet, why is there a big smile on my face then? And at the same time, I don't care. I really fucking don't. I really don't care. And it sounds
I
like
work.
something a psychopath would say or something. It's not.
Well, that's another discussion because, first of all, enlightened people are not psychopaths, but enlightened people and psychopaths can show up similarly
They share an
in
overlap is
certain
the way I put it.
ways
Yeah.
because of the lack of investment in propping things up.
And there's no guilt, no shame, no regret.
But there is that deep kindness or deep.
Yeah. But
With
the
all
sage
being
has
different.
unconditional love.
Yes.
No choice but to have that for everyone. And the psychopath
right,
can't
that's
even
all
know what
there
that's
is.
like. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a doing, it's an ising. It's isness.
Yeah.
But they can look very similar if one's not really perceptive because the lack
to the
of
mind,
investment
to the mind,
in
most
caring.
sages probably look like narcissists, psychopaths, energy vampires. Because they talk about energy, they know how this energy thing works. So maybe they're using it. They're wearing black. I don't know. They're talking about psychopaths. Maybe they're gaslighting us. Well, no.
Well, discernment's always good, but
I thought that was
I
funny too.
think
The word
key in
gaslighting, right?
discernment's
Like
to know
a
you
sage
always
and a
already have.
psychopath would both make you question reality, as gaslighting is at a certain level. Makes you question your own reality. Well, yeah, that part of it. Yeah, we share that part of it. Sorry, what were you saying? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I think that one of the difference between a sage and a psychopath is the sage is going to be telling you you've already got it. They're not going to be trying to.
Yeah, they're going to say, "I have something you don't." Yeah,
and
stay down there.
You've got to sign up for my 7-level course and
do this, don't do that.
Yeah, so the sage is out of that expression of unconditional love is willing to tolerate you're pretending you're not awake.
Yeah,
and work with that, where psychopaths will use that.
Yeah.
So the real not caring is the sage doesn't care whether you show up or not. Doesn't care whether you put money in the donation tray. Doesn't care about whether they're a successful teacher or not. Where the psychopath does have a type of narcissistic concern.
Investment.
Yeah. They want to
investment.
They want something.
Yeah.
So that's a major difference. The psychopath is up to something. They want something. And the true sage doesn't. I used to tell my students that you better be willing to work in one of those 7-Eleven markets, because that may be, if you're an honest teacher, that may be where you end up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do telemarketing, for example. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Well, I worked on a psych unit for 13 years. That's a real education. And I wasn't there much of the time. The robot functioned fine, apparently. Because talk about depersonalization. It
more efficient.
Whatever it did, it functioned.
Yeah. All right. The way I like to jokingly put it is, I say, the seeking mind is personalization disorder.
There you go.
That someone is suffering from something.
Yes, exactly.
The unawakened mind is personalization disorder. And 99.9% of adult humans have that disorder full blast.
And it's interesting in psychotherapy whether they're reinforcing that or they're helping you get free of it.
Yeah, on a certain level, psychotherapy can backfire because now you're telling a story about all these real things that happen to a real person. Tell me again what happened to you, as if it's real, as if it'll validate who you are as a person now in time and space.
So the tricky thing is, not that we want to get off, but in therapy initially, some of that may be necessary, mainly to see what happened, but then to help
not to keep
free
hammering away
the person from the story. Don't identify, don't create your identity through that story, through the abuse, through the horror, through all that stuff. That's not what you are. It may have happened, but that's not who you are. So you have to let those stories, those rackets, all of that go.
And that's why people cling to them. It's partly because that is their identity.
Yes.
And it's because they're clinging to identity.
Yes.
As identity, because they think that they are their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, and they're not any of that. Yeah.
Right. And so they get a little freaky when it starts disappearing.
Yeah.
But that's freedom. It's called freedom.
It's so hard to see from the other side. And I tell people, I say, listen, I'm brilliant, but you could have 10 times the IQ you have now and still not see this.
Yes.
Like, it's not the brilliant mind that can see this. And trust me, I know, I tried, and you just can't see it. It's not a lack of intelligence. Well, why can't I see this? You seem pretty clever. Is I'm not smart enough to get this? No, you're probably too smart.
You know what
to
it
get
is?
this.
I just sort of got this insight. I'm sure I've had it before, but part of it, even with a massive IQ, you have to be willing to, at least for a moment, surrender.
Yeah.
To realize maybe, just maybe, I'm not going to figure this out. And maybe for a moment, I have to open and look at the possibility that this cat who's talking to me has seen it. And just open for a moment to that possibility.
Yeah.
And so at that moment of surrender, that's like when I asked Muktananda, there are several things that happened like that, but I had to be willing to be open.
Yeah.
I could have stayed in a Zen stance and rejected that. But that's where the bhakti comes in, is it can open you.
Yeah, exactly. It can bypass that whole thing. Sometimes a seeker will ask me, like, oh, you're trying to do Dharma combat right now? And it's like,
no.
That's like a 3-year-old asking you if you're having a real sword fight right now. It's like, why would I? That's not. That
Dharma
comes
combat
later.
appears to happen, but the teacher isn't doing it.
Yeah.
It's just having a conversation, and it can get like that, but the teacher's not. See, the teacher's not setting up anything.
Yeah, it's not like the sage is trying to be intentionally combative. They're trying to be They're trying to
be honest.
They are effortlessly being clear and honest.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Radically honest and radically uncompromisingly clear. And the mind doesn't like when things are put very directly and very clearly about the ultimate nature of what it really is, because then it views that as a threat to its very being, because it is.
So you go to a sage and say, do I have free will? And they say no.
They say there's no you to have free will or not. Yeah.
Right. And that can open up a whole can of worms. And the sage doesn't care whether you believe them or not. It's not a matter of belief. It's you see it or you don't see it. And if you're sincere, they will continue to talk with you. If you want to be right, fine, be right.
Right.
Just do it on your time, not mine.
Yeah. Now we're gonna have to start charging. Well, if you can't talk to me, we're gonna have to start charging. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, there's people there's sages that do kind of like different methods, right? Like where the clear seeing can talk to the clear seeing, or you can talk directly to the personhood and kind of use reverse psychology, Like, you're a real person, you have free will. Why haven't you chose to wake up yet?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I don't like that either. I'm gonna go talk to somebody else. Yeah, no matter how this is put, it's not gonna feel good. It's showing you something you don't want to see.
What happens, you see this recycling in satsang, is people will come and you may say something, they get angry and they leave and they go to other teachers, but you've screwed them up because they're seeing through the other stuff. They can't buy into it anymore. So they'd be going maybe 6 months,
10 years go by, they come back to you
because
they're totally different. I'm sorry. Yeah. What were you saying again?
they can't buy into the stories anymore.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. And that's partly why it's so frustrating for the seeker, especially the one that's actively ravenously trying to get this, is because as you get this more and more, it kind of becomes more and more frustrating because it's inherently threatening to your very identity that you hold so dear. And they imagine that they're nothing without that. And they're right.
Right.
You know, it's just they don't realize how liberating that feels and how joyous that is, and how you have just direct access to clarity from then on, which is wonderful. You know, it's very fulfilling. It's very enjoyable to talk to people. Even like as a seeker, I noticed I would shy away from conflict, and now as a sage, I kind of lean toward it. You know, like yeah, come on, do it, yeah, bring it, come on, yeah, please come at me, please. Please personally attack Andrew next, because I've got one loaded.
Well, I used to, for many years, I felt my mission was to teach people to meditate correctly with the type of method,
Yogic sciences, yeah.
gives Shakti and awakens Kundalini. Kundalini is the evolutionary power in humans. Evolve them beyond the current stupidity we're in. And so you could say I had a mission that at some point just fell away, and I'm still willing,
right,
to share or whatever, but I don't feel any drivenness at all anymore.
Because you see the world as perfect now, and you don't see it desperately needing to be something other than it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And if people show up, they show up, and if they don't, they don't. Yeah. But right,
that's if they resonate, that's great. And if they don't resonate, that's great.
And it's such
if they nod their head like a bobble ball, that's great. And if they start flipping out, that's fine. Yeah, exactly. You could take your Superman cape off and have a nice nap or something. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Finally get some rest. Or as I say, now I'm resting in peace. Andrew died 4 years ago, and ever since then, I've been resting in peace.
Right. Well put.
There's no agenda.
No agenda, right.
The sage has no agenda.
Yeah. Right. No agenda. That's correct.
So sometimes we get two sages talking and just sit there and stare at each other like, who's going to serve the ball, man? Who's going to serve that ping pong ball? I can volley forever. Who's going to serve it first? That's what's so funny to me. Is like, they'll join a talk with me, and it's just, I'll just sit there and waiting for them. And it's like, the sage can't serve the ball in this situation. We got to respond to wherever they're at. They're going to bring, like, we're like a mirror. They're going to bring whatever they bring to the mirror, and then they're going to see it a little more clearly, hopefully.
Do you know
it's not going to be pleasant necessarily. What's that?
What's it called? I used the wrong word. It's Japanese sword fighting with bamboo swords.
Oh.
Kendo.
Kendo, okay.
Yeah. I use kendo. So many years ago, I saw a match between the two kendo masters to see who would be champions. And they were both, I think, in their 70s.
Wow.
So they came out, they had their little things on, and they lifted their things, and they just stood there and bowed to each other and backed away. And
That's
nothing
brilliant.
happened. And they were both masters. And you've got to flinch. That. Somebody's got to flinch for the match to begin, and nobody flinched. So
that's funny.
It was a tie, and they both received the championship. But I thought that was just, for a Westerner, there was no action, but there was just pure beauty. They just stood there.
That's great. And the other side of that too reminds me of this Zen koan story. I forget what it was. Obviously, it wasn't like checkers or something. They were playing something like that.
Oh yeah, You put that. Or whatever it is,
I forget what it was. The Zen master walks in and they're playing the game, and then they reset. They're about to play another game. He says, "Okay, whoever loses this game, I'm actually going to cut their head off. I mean it. I actually look me in my eyes. I actually mean it. Do you understand?" And they're both like, because they can tell he actually means it. He's actually going to do that. And so they just sit there and they keep playing, and they're like, eventually they realize, like, what are we gonna do, man? So they just keep staying in tie no matter what.
Yeah.
And then eventually he walks by and flips the board over and walks back out of the room.
Well, that's a pretty good description of how most people live their lives.
Yeah.
Keep the game and play.
Or the way Adyashanti put it, he's talking about how awakening is like being checkmated. You're moving around, you're moving around, you're moving around, then you get to a point where now you're fucked. Now there's nothing you can do. And now you're checkmated. Now it's over. This is the end, you know. And words of sages kind of do that sometimes, where the mind thinks it's oh so clever and it'll try to okay, well, then let me try this. And then eventually it accidentally sees it directly and clearly and it freezes, you know, it's like, and it doesn't like that, but that can be very potently helpful. And so again, when I start every talk and when I end every talk, I go like this. And if it's the secret, it just means just stop. Just come to a full stop.
It's we are so identified with the mind. By that I mean thinking that most people have no idea that this isn't for the mind, and that there's entire realms of being that have nothing to do with the mind. And of course, when you say that to somebody, it's their mind hearing it and trying to absorb that. And it's just feeding the problem.
And what the mind hears is, oh, the mind, can go beyond the mind. Okay, I
Yeah,
like that idea.
yes, yeah.
And it's like, well, no, not the mind,
Right.
no. I am can't keep, no. But yes, there are realms beyond I am.
Yeah, the realms beyond what you think you are. Yeah, think you are, right.
Beyond the personality of the body. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think Adi Ashanti is a very good teacher.
Yeah, people give him a lot of flack, and usually I just sit there and I pause and I go, well, listen, he's like my twin, you know, like when I hear his story and mine, just so you know, it's like kind of like my twin brother you're talking smack about, just because he has a Sanskrit name or something. Oh, you're a non-duality. You'll like it if I shit on Adi Shanti, right? I'm like, no, he's my twin brother, but okay. And they're like, oh. When I hear his story about awakening in mine, there's something about it. I don't know exactly what it is. There's something about it that just sounds just like my twin. I don't know how to put that.
Well, I think a lot of awakening is very similar in that we
Yeah.
do awaken out of what we think we are. And depending on a person's, I mean, I just a California boy and everything, and depending on backgrounds,
Yeah.
people try to talk about it, but awakening is pretty much pretty much the same for anybody. I mean, again, the descriptions can vary, but what happens is
the core of that is
yeah,
not only not up for debate, but shared amongst all actual sages. Yeah.
right.
And there's no one claiming to be an actual sage. There's no one
Right.
there. That's what's being claimed.
Right. It's ridiculous to talk about, and yet there's no other way, humans,
no one has ever
everybody
achieved
becomes,
enlightenment. Yeah.
yeah, until people become all psychically attuned. And that's again the Dharma transmission. That's the beauty of that. It's possible right now. Is people can literally open themselves to having that direct transmission.
And it's available. Some people are like, man, there's the non-duality scene's crowded. There's a lot of you people floating around. It's like, well, okay, it just means you have more and more access to it, easier and easier. It's not like, there's a lot of like cookie cutter sages that are just kind of saying the same words too. But there's a lot of
yeah, you can teach a parrot to teach this.
Yeah, exactly. You could, yeah. But there'd be something missing if it was just words. And that's the thing they don't get. Like, oh, you're just saying words. Like, okay. There's something behind the words though, especially like people like you and I who are kind of like charged with Shakti. There's even if we're not doing direct, I'm gonna zap you consciously with Kundalini now type Shaktipat, which is fleeting. But if you show up to Satsang and you have an ongoing dialogue, there's a more permanent, lasting Shakti transmission, not only through the words but through just the body language and the subtlety that's being expressed. And we're inviting people to detect the subtlety in a way. And we're
The
providing
subtlety.
direct access to clarity as like an impersonal interface.
So in satsang, there is no agenda, and ultimately no method. So people are invited to rest. In that resting, they enter that field. In that field, so they might think, this happened because I was in satsang, but satsang's 24/7. Once they know how to rest in that field is non-local. So it doesn't just happen at a certain time with a certain person. And so that ability to release or surrender and enter that field of satsang is always available. And so in a way,
in the presence of truth is what it means. So really, it's not that I, the sage, am the truth, and I'm going to sit in a chair between flowers up on a stage. And it's like, that's not what's meant necessarily. It's that you're in the presence of your own truth, and you have direct access to that,
which is always
at
available.
all times if you were in that state. And
if you relax.
Yeah, if you can relax,
because the ego, the separate ego is attention. It's an anxiety, really. It's
a knot of mental tension.
It's a resistance,
And that knot of mental tension doesn't even necessarily need to be relaxed. It can just be realized to be illusory.
Right.
And there's its own type of relaxation from that, even if you don't unravel it.
It's seeing that is also the expression.
Yeah. So there's shunyata, there's emptiness, but there's also apparently an appearance,
right,
that is inherently empty. It's not just nothing. That's just a concept. So there is an appearance.
Like Shaivism, Swami Chitanananda, I think, came up with it recently, and Acharya Premananda and I've been talking about is dynamic stillness. Mm-hmm. Stillness is the emptiness, but it's dynamic. It's expressed as everything, the Shakti, So dynamic stillness, that's what's happening. And that's why I have no problem talking about reality tunnels with you, because they're all expressions. So radical non-duality is also the acceptance of the possibility of UFOs, whatever the hell we've been talking about today, is not in conflict with that ultimate realization. It's just
people say, well, you just contradicted yourself. I say, I know, isn't that wonderful? And they're like, wait, what? Aren't you pissed off that I pointed out that I was trying to highlight the contradictory nature of what I'm expressing here. Thank you so much. I rejoice every time this character contradicts itself fully. Which is very different from as a seeker.
Non-duality means non-duality. And if you can imagine
all encompassing, it's the ultimate umbrella term.
It's the
ultimate umbrella term.
Yeah. And that's why I use all inclusive. It's usually simpler, but same thing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. So in it also includes excluding.
Everything is welcome.
Yeah. And then in Dzogchen, there's different ways you can translate the word Dzogchen. It can mean the great perfection. It can mean the great completion, but it can also mean the great encompassment. In other words, again, it's the ultimate umbrella term. It includes everything. Yeah, it's what is.
Right. So the ultimate upaya in Kashmir Shaivism is basically Adi Yoga or Dzogchen. They're really teachings. In my opinion, what happened in Kashmir before the Tibetan Buddhism in 800 AD or whatever it was, all these people in that area came together, and they didn't say, I'm a Buddhist or I'm a Shaivite. They were all yogis, and they were all sharing, and they were all talking.
And they were all comparing notes and debating and shitting on each other and telling jokes.
Like you said, Kachari Mudra worked for me. You ought to try it. That's interesting. Anyway, there's a guy out there with his shirt off with his baseball cap on backwards and his hands in his pocket, and he's just standing there. Hope he's happy. Anyway, Yeah, I think they were just comparing notes and talking. I don't think they necessarily designated, that I am a Buddhist
Yeah,
or a Shaivite or
right.
whatever. I think they just were all doing that. And then years later, people own the sects and stuff because
Yeah,
I don't make that when I teach. Like I'm going to be talking this Sunday a lot, like I said, at a co-meditation and clear light and
yeah,
probably wrathful and peaceful deities and all that nonsense.
yeah,
But it's just a way of talking. It's not necessarily
yeah.
Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, exactly. It's just archetypes of your own
What happens
enlightened
when people,
awareness.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. So we don't have to say it's this or that or the other thing.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know who Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was?
I think so. Sounds
He
vaguely
was he
familiar.
was head of the Nyingma lineage. He was very tall for a Tibetan Buddhist. He was Dzogchen, one of the great Dzogchen masters. He was one of the Dalai Lama's teachers, and he
Oh,
was the
okay. Yeah,
one
that's probably what I know.
who initiated me in the Maha'adi.
Oh, nice.
So what he did is he's like channeling Padmasambhava during the
Yeah,
initiation.
I actually just got an empowerment this morning
Oh, really?
via a certain lineage, uh, Padmasambhava. Yeah, I was receiving
So,
Shakti for
so it's
once.
the same
It
lineage.
worked.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was this slightly different lineage. Well, yeah, through Padmasambhava. So,
The Yingma,
but it
usually
was,
the Yingma lineage. Yeah. Clear
yeah,
light.
there's a lot of different lineages, but I know they all trace themselves back to directly getting the juice from Padmasambhava.
Right.
It
Right.
works.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So you got that this morning.
Yeah, I've never had a Vajrayana type or a Sokchen type empowerment before, but
Cool.
usually I'm the one zapping people. Usually it's the other way around. So it was nice to, but yeah, it was good. Yeah, and I'm very sensitive to those energies and detecting the different flavors of those energies, and so it was interesting. Yeah, seemed to work. Yeah, something's different. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's again what we've been talking about. These
yeah.
guys and women are connected.
It's funny because I had so I had in chunks of like 2-hour sessions. I had the empowerment. Then I talked to the person I was telling you about, where they did the bardo type stuff with
Ah,
the dying. Then I talked to you, and you're bringing up
the same
those
things.
things. And when I looked at my schedule for today, I'm like, oh my god, today's Kundalini day apparently this year, because I got all these all the Kundalini people today. All they just happen to be all on the same day. Sure they are. Sure they are. I get an empowerment, then I'm going to talk to so and so, and then I'm going to talk to Tom. Sure.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, again, the empowerments, are very powerful, and unless somebody is open and receptive, there are
Yeah.
so many skeptics, and I feel sad for them because
Yeah.
they're defending their encapsulation.
Yeah. There was no belief or faith involved in the
Right,
empowerment this morning,
right.
and to the delight of the person doing it for me as well, because
It's
not
easy.
everyone's that subtly detecting that already awake and receptive and has had Kundalini awakening and tuned into that to begin with. And I had done Padma Sambhava based mantra Vajrayana work for a few years before and just never got an official empowerment. So certain parts of the empowerment were already like primed for that
Right,
energy, it
right.
seemed.
So you're
So when
tuned
it was
into that.
talking about Padma Sambhava's emanations or whatever it was, I could feel could feel it kick on type of deal. And then when we talk about other certain deities, I felt nothing. You know what I mean? It was interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I try
Seems like
to I try to break it down. Like when I talk about wrathful and peaceful deities as mind states,
yeah,
I try to translate them into what they actually really are. But
yeah,
there are all sorts of ways of misunderstanding because, like we said, they're different cultures at a different time, and they were
yeah,
using the language of their time, and it has to be updated. But the
right.
transmission of light, you don't have to know or believe anything.
Yeah, and I could even, there were certain points where like certain names were mentioned, I had no idea who they were, and I could feel a certain personality wash over me, and I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know who that is, but they like to smile, I think, or whatever
So
it is. Like,
you said you did the Padmasambhava mantra?
well, they give their own. Yeah, I did the Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. I did that one a lot, and but I
Yeah,
used to
so
do a
that's like
bunch
a
of Sanskrit
tuning
mantras.
station. That's like
Yeah,
when we
yeah,
tune our TVs, we're tuning
yeah,
into that
exactly.
frequency. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. And there was like very subtle, spontaneous kriyas, and it reminded me a lot of Kriya Yoga at times and Kashmir Shaivism at times, just because of the energy, what it did. And it was like usually I can feel the energy to a certain extent, and it'll wash over me a certain way to a certain extent within a certain time frame. With this, it was like much faster, like I got I wasn't really expecting anything. I was just like, okay, let's see what happens. And just being spaciously open and receptive, and detecting subtlety and trying to tune in to whatever was happening. And yeah, almost like it was, I don't even think the empowerment had begun. It was like 5 minutes before they even got to that part. It was happening then. And then like 5 minutes later, like, okay, you're gonna feel this, that. I'm thinking, I felt that 5 minutes ago. This is weird. Whoa.
There's your time warp.
Yeah, exactly. And it kept happening like that. So about every minute that went by, I'd experience something, then they'd explain what you should be experiencing right now a minute later. And I'm like, whoa, that just already happened when you were getting ready to even dive into that. That's interesting. But yeah, it felt
Well,
like
that's because that intelligence does what it wants to when it wants to.
yeah. And it
Humans
was,
sometimes are a little bit behind the.
and I had been in a position where, like, probably the type that it would have been appropriate to receive that type of empowerment maybe 7 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's like so primed for it that it was just, you know what I mean? It was interesting. It washed over me, and it was like chills going up your spine, but your entire body, and then it saturated fully, and it felt like my whole body blushed. Is the only way I can explain it. And then it calmed down, and then there was just silence and open, soft spaciousness and emptiness, and then like a minute later, like, okay, you might feel some warmth. I'm thinking, it was funny. It was just funny. Did it happen a minute before, like when, if you were like linked with it, that's how you can tell. Not only was I not doing something, but it was like acausal in a way. It was like like you said, like a time warp thing,
Yeah. Well, that's with the true gurus I spent time with, all of that stuff so out of time space the way we normally experience, and so many things happening that people go, well, how do you explain that? You don't. That's how you do it.
That's
It's
the
just,
point. Yeah, it can't be explained by mind.
yeah. You can't
But did you
talk
see
about it
that?
in this realm.
Did you catch that? Yeah, did you detect that subtle thing that was happened? It wasn't that subtle, was it? You did catch it. Oh, good. Yeah, exactly. No, you can't explain that, and you can't explain it away either.
Right.
Not even
Exactly.
to yourself. Yeah, as skeptical as
Right.
you can be, you can't be like, oh, that was bullshit because, fuck, what was that? How does that work? Yeah. You can't even throw the baby out with the bathwater if it's a powerful enough experience. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's one of the things somebody said to me a while ago. Is they say, "So you still believe in Kundalini?" And I said, "No, but she still seems to believe in me." This
Oh, and
isn't
I just
about
got
me
graced
believing
again.
in
Yeah,
Kundalini
yeah,
or not. It's
yeah.
not.
This is
It's like,
well beyond
you
belief.
still believe
Yeah,
in breathing? It's like,
yeah. It's like getting punched in the face. Like, oh, you believe in fists? It's like, well, I still have a black eye. What do you mean?
yeah,
How can you say that? Yeah, exactly. That's
it's
what's
not
funny
something
though.
to believe in.
It's not always subtle, right? Like that's the thing. Like, oh, you're just imagining this and it's real subtle. No, it's not subtle. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I wish I could.
Yeah.
I don't have the imagination to imagine this.
Yeah, it's true.
So you've had quite a day today.
Yeah, it keeps going. Yeah,
Well, I'm going to have to stop in a few minutes because I think Bonnie is getting dinner ready, which is always a good idea.
Yeah,
But I
probably.
really feel, we've talked about so many things. I think we hold them in the same way without
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
worrying about explaining them as one way or the other. They're just
Yeah.
what's happening. And so I
Yeah.
think I appreciate that.
Yeah, me too. I've always appreciated that about us, and I know I could sense you probably thought there would be more like jargon clashing or something before this call began. I could sense that, but no, there isn't. You know, that's the thing. And I kind of like giving different impression. Like people see my stuff online, like, oh, it's just another like radical non-dualist or something, and then they actually talk to me in person. They're like, oh, this was more refreshing and open than I expected. And
But that's interesting. You say that. I've never experienced. One of the reasons I feel we get along online is because I've never experienced you in that radical, rigid Advaita
yeah,
Vedanta.
dogmatic fascism.
There's only
Yeah.
Brahman. Everything else. I
Oh
think
yeah. Yeah.
you're having a lot more fun.
Yeah, I like to play with it.
Yeah,
Exactly
and then
right. I'm having
see
more
the
fun with it. Exactly
possibilities.
right.
You're not afraid to
Yeah,
look at something or whatever it is. But I've never experienced you as rigid.
that's good.
Yeah,
It's so
it
funny
is.
the things I hear from people sometimes that they'll see 5 or 10 posts and think they made up their mind already. It's like,
Well, that's
well,
true.
you shouldn't
The
call that
danger.
non-duality. You should call that something else, and you should really not limit yourself to just radical. And I was like, were you here when I posted about the Kundalini awakening? Were you here when I posted about, you know,
I
yeah,
agree. It's Facebook's
about
tricky
astral
territory.
samadhi and energy body? Like, you didn't catch those posts, did you? Maybe I'll have to repost that one for the new audience.
Well, I've almost created a disclaimer before I post anything, is because it's just so. I think
Warning may be peppered with personal opinion from the dualistic side of the mind.
right. I think probably most of the people I interact with on Facebook are great, but they're definitely trolls, and there are definitely
Oh yeah,
people who, no matter what is said, they're going to have an issue with it, and they're going to be bringing out
yeah,
the big guns and
right.
proving I'm wrong and they're right, and that's fine. But I'm
And
not
I
going to
invite
interact.
that because then the audience online can see how you respond to something like that and go, oh,
Well, I
okay, I
often
see what's
don't.
going on here. Yeah,
I,
or you just won't react at all, or if
right.
it gets bad enough repeatedly, I'll block them. But that I only
Yeah,
block
yeah.
probably 5 people a year or something like that.
If people are sincere, I will interact with them. If they're
Yeah,
just trying to
right, exactly.
impress people or whatever they're doing, I don't care. They can say
Yeah,
whatever they want. I'm not going to respond. But
yeah,
there
I'll
are
leave it
sincere people.
there for them to show their ass, but I won't
Right, right.
necessarily respond or react whatsoever. Yeah, exactly. That is the response. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're looking for attention. They're looking for.
Yes.
They want your energy. They want your anger. They want your juice. No, if you this keep scrolling. Nope. Yeah.
I also want a little aside is I love it when some people on Facebook start arguing with a friend of mine who I actually know, and they're like experts and authorities in their field. And so here's this guy who's seen a YouTube video
Yeah,
arguing with a
exactly.
guy who actually knows what they're talking about, and it's hilarious
Yeah.
to watch that because it's like, oh man,
I
you
see
have
that
no
even in
idea.
the Buddha at the gas pump group. Sometimes I'll go in there and then a sage will that I've never met in my life, but you can tell as a sage just by the way they're typing it out. They've had the same awakenings, They type it out, they explain it out clearly, and someone else go, well, no, it's not actually that way because blah 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 blah. And I'll go, no, actually, I agree with them. Like that's how it
Yeah,
is. Like yeah.
they'll
It's
start
just funny how
reciting
that
from
works.
a book or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah. But I love the diversity. I welcome it, and I welcome conflict and misunderstanding and all that too, because it's all ultimately clarifying to the greater audience to see all that happening and to see how the awakened awareness would respond to that. And each question is its own antidote in a way. And so it's good to have it all out there. Like my wall is public. I have 5,000 friends, but it's public. Like if someone's not my friend, they can still comment on it.
Yeah, I think mine's I don't know how it all works, but it certainly seems to have enough people from God only knows where commenting. So
yeah.
Well, Andrew, this has been great, but I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, me too.
And if you ever want to do this again, it's been
absolutely.
fun. So,
yeah, I appreciate you, and
I appreciate you.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.